The little girl's words cut through the howling blizzard like a knife through Caleb Rowan's heart. Take him instead of me. She collapsed at his fence, clutching an infant, her face bruised and eyes clouded with blindness. What kind of monster had driven these children into a Montana death storm? Caleb didn't know it yet, but saving them would cost him everything. His peace, his safety, maybe his life. Stay with me until the end, and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. The wind screamed across the Montana high country like a living thing bent on murder. Caleb Rowan stood at the window of his log cabin, watching the world disappear into white fury. Snow came down in sheets so thick he couldn't see past the porch rail. The thermometer nailed to the outer wall read 12 below zero, and that was before accounting for the wind that clawed at everything like frozen knives. He was 43 years old, and he'd seen plenty of blizzards in his time. This was one of the bad ones, the kind that killed cattle, collapsed roofs, buried travelers, the kind that made a man grateful for 4 solid walls and a working fireplace. Caleb turned from the window and added another log to the fire. The flames jumped and crackled, casting dancing shadows across the rough-hewn beams overhead. The cabin was small, just 2 rooms, a main living area, and a bedroom, but it was tight and warm. He'd built it himself 15 years ago, back when he'd had dreams bigger than solitude. Those dreams were dead now. Buried with Emily and the baby they'd never gotten to name. He shook his head, pushing the memories down where they belonged. No point in dwelling on what couldn't be changed. He moved to the kitchen area, really just a counter and a cast-iron stove against the far wall, and poured himself coffee from the pot that stayed perpetually warm. The liquid was thick and black, strong enough to strip paint. He drank it anyway. Outside, the wind shrieked louder. Something banged against the side of the cabin, probably the gate to the equipment shed coming loose. Caleb swore under his breath. He'd have to go out and secure it before the whole damn thing blew into the next county. He was pulling on his heavy coat when he heard it, a sound that didn't belong to the storm. He froze, listening. There it was again. Faint, almost swallowed by the wind, but unmistakable. A child's voice crying out. Caleb's blood went cold. Nobody should be out in this. Nobody could be out in this. Not and survive. He grabbed his rifle from above the door, not because he expected trouble, but because a man didn't venture into a Montana blizzard unarmed, and stepped out onto the porch. The cold hit him like a fist. The wind tore at his coat, found every gap, every opening. Snow stung his face, got into his eyes, his mouth. He could barely see 3 feet ahead. "Hello!" he shouted into the maelstrom. "Anyone out there?" Nothing. Just the wind's relentless howl. He was about to go back inside, convince himself he'd imagined it, when he heard it again. Closer this time. A child's voice, weak and desperate. "Please, help!" Caleb moved off the porch, into the full fury of the storm. Snow immediately caked his beard, his eyebrows. He squinted against the wind, searching for any sign of movement. There. At the fence line, maybe 30 yards out. A dark shape against the white, barely visible, collapsed in the snow. Caleb ran. The snow came up past his knees in places, the drifts already 2 feet deep and growing. The wind pushed against him, tried to shove him back. He lowered his head and plowed forward. When he reached the fence, his heart nearly stopped. It was a child. A little girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old, lying face down in the snow. She wore a thin dress, no coat, no gloves. Her feet were bare feet in a Montana blizzard. Sweet, merciful God. But that wasn't the worst of it. Clutched against her chest, wrapped in what looked like a woman's shawl, was a baby. An infant, couldn't be more than a few months old, its tiny face blue with cold. "Jesus Christ," Caleb breathed. He dropped to his knees beside them, rifle forgotten in the snow. Hey, little one, can you hear me?" The girl's eyes fluttered open. They were gray, or maybe blue. Hard to tell in the failing light. But there was something wrong with them. They didn't quite focus. One pupil was larger than the other, and there was a milky quality to the left eye. "Sir?" she whispered. Her lips were purple. Are you the angel?" "No angel, sweetheart. Just a man. But I'm going to help you. Can you stand?" She tried. God love her, she tried. but her legs wouldn't hold her. She collapsed back into the snow, clutching the baby tighter. "My brother," she gasped. "Please, take him. Take him instead of me." The words hit Caleb like a hammer blow. Take him instead of me. What kind of hell had this child lived through to say something like that? "I'm taking you both," he said firmly. He scooped the girl up in one arm. She weighed nothing, just skin and bones, and cradled the baby against his chest with the other. "Hold on tight, you hear me? Both of you hold on." The girl's thin arms wrapped around his neck. He could feel her shivering, violent tremors that shook her whole body. The baby didn't move at all. Caleb turned back toward the cabin. The wind had erased his footprints. For one terrifying moment, he couldn't see the lights in the windows. The world was just white, endless and directionless. Then a gap in the snow, and there it was, the warm glow of home, beacon in the storm. He ran. Every step was agony. The snow grabbed at his legs. The wind fought him. The children felt like they weighed 1,000 pounds, and his arms screamed in protest. But he didn't stop. Couldn't stop. The porch steps nearly defeated him. His foot slipped on ice, and he went down on one knee, arms tightening protectively around his precious cargo. The girl whimpered. The baby still didn't make a sound. "Almost there," Caleb panted. "Almost home." He kicked the door open and stumbled inside, slamming it shut behind him with his foot. The sudden quiet was deafening. The heat from the fire felt like paradise. He carried the children to the hearth and laid them down as gently as he could. The girl's eyes were closed now, her breathing shallow. The baby, God, the baby. Caleb unwrapped the shawl with trembling fingers. The infant was a boy, he saw. Maybe 4 months old, with wispy dark hair and skin that looked almost translucent. His lips were gray. His chest barely moved. "No," Caleb said. "No, no, no. You stay with me, little man. You stay with me." He pulled off his coat and wrapped it around both children, then added his flannel shirt for good measure. The fire was roaring, but it wasn't enough. He needed more heat, faster. He ran to the bedroom and yanked every blanket off the bed, his own coat from the closet, anything that could provide warmth. He piled them on the children, leaving only their faces exposed. The girl's eyes opened again. She looked up at him with those strange, unfocused eyes. "Is Micah alive?" she whispered. "Is my brother alive?" Caleb looked at the baby. Micah. The tiny chest was still moving, barely. That was something. That was hope. "He's alive," Caleb said. "You both are. And you're going to stay that way. What's your name, sweetheart?" "Juniper." She was shaking so hard her teeth chattered. "Juniper Hale." "Juniper. That's a pretty name. I'm Caleb, Caleb Rowan. This is my home, and you're safe here. Do you understand? You're safe." A single tear rolled down her cheek. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." But even as he said it, doubt gnawed at him. Because children didn't end up barefoot in blizzards by accident. Children didn't collapse at strangers' fences with babies in their arms, because everything was fine. Something had driven these kids into the storm. Something bad enough that freezing to death seemed like the better option. And whatever that something was, it was still out there. Caleb stood and moved to the kitchen, filling a pot with water and setting it on the stove to heat. Lukewarm water first, to bring their temperatures up slowly. Too hot too fast could send them into shock. While the water heated, he examined them more carefully. The baby, Micah, seemed uninjured apart from the cold. His breathing was getting stronger, his color starting to improve with the warmth. Thank God. But Juniper. Jesus, Juniper. Now that he could see her clearly in the firelight, the damage was obvious and sickening. Her left eye had that milky quality he'd noticed outside. Not blindness, but definitely impaired vision. There were bruises on her arms, old ones fading to yellow-green and fresh ones dark purple. Her dress was torn in places, patched in others. Her bare feet were cut and bleeding, toenails blackened by cold. But worst of all were the marks on her neck. Finger-shaped bruises, purple and distinct. Someone had choked this child. Rage flared in Caleb's chest, hot and primal. He'd been a gentle man before Emily died, slow to anger, quick to forgive. But grief had burned away the softer parts of him, left him harder, colder. And looking at those bruises on Juniper's throat, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. The desire to hurt someone. Badly. "Juniper," he said, keeping his voice level with effort. "Who did this to you?" She didn't answer, just closed her eyes and curled tighter around her brother. "Sweetheart, I need to know. Who hurt you? Who put these marks on your neck?" Still nothing. Caleb took a breath, forcing himself to calm down. The girl was terrified, traumatized, half frozen. He couldn't push her. Not yet. The water was warm now. He soaked a cloth and began gently wiping down Juniper's feet, cleaning the cuts and checking for frostbite. Her toes were waxy white in places, but he didn't see any blackening. With luck and care, she'd keep them all. He worked in silence, letting the warmth and safety of the cabin do their work. Slowly, gradually, the shivering began to ease. Color started creeping back into both children's faces. Micah began to squirm under the blankets, making small, fussy noises. "He's hungry," Juniper whispered. Her eyes were still closed. "He hasn't eaten since yesterday." Yesterday. They'd been out there since yesterday. "I've got canned milk," Caleb said. "I can warm it up, mix it with a little water. Will that work?" "Yes, sir." Caleb prepared the bottle, an old one he'd kept from the baby they'd lost, couldn't bring himself to throw away, and tested the temperature on his wrist. When it was right, he knelt beside the children and carefully lifted Micah free of the blankets. The baby's eyes opened, dark blue, alert now, and fixed on Caleb's face. Then he began to cry. Not weak mewling anymore, but a proper, healthy, pissed-off baby cry. Caleb found himself grinning despite everything. "There you go, little man. There's that fighting spirit." He offered the bottle. Micah latched on immediately, sucking with desperate hunger. He drained half the bottle in seconds, paused to breathe, then went back for more. Juniper had propped herself up on one elbow, watching. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "He likes you." "He likes the milk," Caleb corrected. But warmth spread through his chest anyway, unfamiliar and almost painful. It had been so long since he'd held a baby, so long since he'd fed one, watched those tiny hands grip the bottle, heard those satisfied little grunts. Emily would have loved this. She'd always wanted a house full of kids. He pushed the thought away. Emily was gone. Had been for 7 years. This wasn't about him or his grief. This was about 2 children who needed help. When Micah finished eating, Caleb burped him expertly, some things you didn't forget, and laid him back down in the nest of blankets. The baby immediately stuck his fist in his mouth and started grunting. "He needs changing," Juniper said quietly. "I figured, but I don't have any diapers. We'll have to improvise." Caleb tore up an old shirt, fashioned a makeshift diaper, and changed the baby with practiced efficiency. Micah seemed unimpressed by the accommodations, but stopped fussing once he was clean and warm. "Thank you," Juniper whispered. "Thank you for not leaving us." Caleb looked at her, really looked at her. She was so small, so fragile, with those damaged eyes and that bruised body. But there was steel in her too, strength that had kept her alive through God knew what, that had driven her to protect her brother even at the cost of her own life. This was a child who'd had to grow up too fast. Way too fast. "Juniper," he said gently, "I need you to tell me what happened. Who hurt you? Where are your parents?" For a long moment, she didn't answer. The fire crackled. Outside, the wind howled on, relentless. Then, so quietly he almost didn't hear, "They're dead." Caleb's chest tightened. "Both of them?" "Mama died when Micah was born. Papa—" Her voice broke. "Papa died 3 months ago. They said it was an accident. The wagon wheel broke, and he fell under it. But I know it wasn't an accident. I know it." "Why do you say that?" Juniper's thin hands clenched into fists. "Because Elias checked the wagon the day before. And Papa was careful. He always checked everything twice. He wouldn't have just— It wasn't an accident." "Who's Elias?" The girl flinched like she'd been struck. Her breathing quickened, and for a moment Caleb thought she might start hyperventilating. Hey, it's okay," he said quickly. "You're safe here. Nobody's going to hurt you. Just breathe, sweetheart. Breathe." It took a minute, but she got herself under control. When she spoke again, her voice was flat, hollow. The voice of someone who'd learned to hide their terror. "Elias Drummond. He He was Papa's business partner. After Mama died, and after Papa was gone, Elias became our guardian. He said he'd take care of us. He said Papa would have wanted it. But he didn't take care of you. No, sir. Juniper's hand moved unconsciously to her throat, to those finger-shaped bruises. He said we cost too much, that we ate too much, that I was useless because of my eye, that Micah cried too much. He said if we couldn't earn our keep, he'd find someplace else to put us. An orphanage. Or worse. Caleb's jaw clenched. He hit you. Yes, sir. When I didn't work fast enough. When Micah cried. When I asked about the inheritance Papa left us. She looked up at him, and there was something desperate in her eyes. Papa had money, Mr. Rowan. He had land and mining shares and a bank account. He told me about it before he died. He said Micah and I would never want for anything. But Elias says there's no money. He says Papa died with debts, and the debts took everything. But you don't believe that. I heard him talking, late at night, when he thought I was asleep. He was with other men, and they were laughing about it, about how easy it was, how nobody questioned anything because everyone trusted Elias Drummond. The rage was back, burning in Caleb's gut. He stole from you. He killed your father and stole your inheritance. Juniper nodded, tears streaming down her face now. I think so. I don't have proof. But I heard them, Mr. Rowan. I heard them. So you ran. I had to. Her voice cracked. Yesterday morning, Elias said he'd found a place for Micah, a family that wanted a baby boy. He said they'd pay good money and that I should be grateful someone would take him. But the way he said it, I knew it was bad. I knew if I let Micah go, I'd never see him again. So I waited until nighttime, until Elias was drunk and passed out, and I took Micah and I ran. In the middle of a blizzard. I didn't know it would get this bad. It was just snowing a little when we left, but then the wind came and it got colder, and I couldn't see where I was going. She wiped her eyes with shaking hands. I thought we were going to die. I prayed we wouldn't, but I thought we would. And then I saw your light through the snow, your cabin, and I thought maybe God was giving us one last chance. Caleb sat back on his heels, processing it all. A dead mother, a murdered father, a stolen inheritance, an abusive guardian planning to sell a baby. And this little girl, this brave, terrified little girl, had grabbed her infant brother and walked into a killing storm because that seemed safer than staying. Jesus wept. You did the right thing, he said firmly. Running, coming here, all of it. You saved your brother's life and your own. You understand me? You saved both of you. Juniper looked at him with those damaged eyes, and for the first time, something like hope flickered there. We can stay? The question hung in the air between them. Caleb knew he should think about this, should consider the implications. He was a single man, a recluse who hadn't talked to anyone but his horses and cattle for months at a time. He didn't know anything about raising children, hadn't even been able to protect the one child he'd tried to have, and there would be trouble. Elias Drummond wouldn't just let two children disappear into a blizzard and shrug it off, especially not if he'd murdered their father and stolen their inheritance. Men like that didn't leave loose ends. Taking these kids in meant picking a fight, meant bringing danger to his door. The smart thing would be to keep them warm through the night, then take them to town in the morning. Let the law handle it. Let someone else deal with Elias Drummond. That was the smart thing. But when Caleb looked at Juniper's face, at the hope and fear warring there, at the way she instinctively curled her body around her baby brother even now, even safe and warm, protecting him with her last ounce of strength, he thought of Emily, of the baby they'd lost, of 7 years spent alone in this cabin, going through the motions of living without ever really being alive. Maybe this was his chance at redemption. Maybe this was God, if there was a God, giving him one last chance to do something right. You can stay, Caleb said. Both of you, as long as you need to. Juniper's face crumpled. She started crying, really crying now, deep, wrenching sobs that shook her whole body. The kind of crying that came from a soul that had held itself together through pure willpower and could finally let go. Caleb gathered her up, carefully, gently, and held her while she cried. She weighed nothing. just bones and desperation and strength that should have belonged to someone 10 times her age. "It's okay," he murmured. "Let it out. You're safe now. I promise you're safe." He meant it. Whatever came next, whatever trouble Elias Drummond brought to his door, Caleb would face it. These children had survived too much to be taken back into hell. Outside, the blizzard screamed on, burying the world in white. But inside the cabin, 3 souls huddled by the fire, finding warmth and safety in the most unlikely of places. A broken man, a damaged girl, a helpless baby. A family forged not by blood, but by desperation and grace. And though none of them knew it yet, this was only the beginning. The storm outside would pass by morning, but the storm coming for them, the one named Elias Drummond, was just gathering strength. Caleb held Juniper until her sobs quieted, until her breathing evened out, until she finally succumbed to the exhaustion that had been chasing her for who knew how long. He laid her gently back down beside Micah, tucked the blankets around them both, and stood watching them sleep. They looked so peaceful now, so innocent. You couldn't see the bruises in the firelight, couldn't see the damage or the fear. But it was there. It would always be there, just under the surface, unless someone gave them reason to believe the world could be kind again. Caleb had failed that task once before, failed Emily and their baby when it mattered most. He wouldn't fail these children, whatever it took. The blizzard blew itself out sometime before dawn. Caleb woke to silence, the kind of deep cushioned quiet that only came after heavy snow. He'd fallen asleep in the chair by the fire, rifle across his lap, watching over the children like some grizzled guardian angel who'd forgotten how to do the job properly. His back screamed in protest as he stood. 43 years old and sleeping in chairs like a damn fool. He stretched, joints popping, and moved to the window. The world outside was transformed. Snow blanketed everything in pristine white, drifts piled 6 feet high against the barn, icicles hanging from the porch roof like crystal daggers. The sky was that pale, washed-out blue that came after storms, and the sun was just starting to peek over the eastern mountains, turning the snow gold and pink. Beautiful, deadly. Montana in winter. Caleb turned from the window and checked on the children. They were still asleep, curled together under the mountain of blankets. Juniper had one thin arm draped protectively over Micah, even in sleep. The baby's face was peaceful, his color good, his breathing steady and strong. They'd made it through the night. That was something. Caleb rebuilt the fire, then moved quietly to the kitchen and started coffee. While it percolated, he took stock of his supplies. He had plenty of food for himself: smoked meat, canned goods, flour, coffee, the basics. But children needed more than that. They needed milk, eggs, fresh vegetables when possible, and diapers. Lord, he needed proper diapers, not torn-up shirts. Which meant a trip to town. Soon. The thought sat uneasily in his gut. Town meant people, and people meant questions. Where'd these kids come from? Who are their folks? Why are they with you, Caleb Rowan, you hermit son of a bitch who hasn't spoken 10 words to anyone in months? And it meant word would get back to Elias Drummond. Had to. Nothing stayed secret in Copper Falls for long, but there was no help for it. The children needed things he couldn't provide, and he wasn't going to let them suffer for his preference for solitude. Behind him, he heard a small sound. He turned to find Juniper awake, propped up on one elbow, watching him with those uneven eyes. "Morning, sweetheart," Caleb said gently. "How are you feeling?" "Warm," she whispered, like it was a miracle. "My feet hurt." "I expect they do. Frostbite's setting in, but I think you'll keep all your toes if we're careful." He poured coffee into a tin cup, added a generous amount of sugar and even more canned milk, and brought it to her. "Here, drink this slowly. It'll help." Juniper struggled into a sitting position, wincing. She took the cup with both hands. He noticed her fingers were still stiff and clumsy from the cold, and sipped cautiously. Her eyes widened. "It's sweet." "Too sweet?" "No, sir. It's perfect." She took another sip, then another. "I've never had coffee before. Elias said it was wasted on children." Caleb felt that familiar rage kindle in his chest. "Well, Elias isn't here, is he? You drink all you want." Micah chose that moment to wake up with a wail that could have shattered glass. Juniper immediately tried to get up, to go to him, but Caleb waved her back down. "I've got him. You rest those feet." He changed Micah's makeshift diaper. God, he really needed proper ones. And prepared another bottle. The baby ate with the same desperate hunger as the night before, finishing the whole thing and demanding more. "He's always hungry," Juniper said, watching with worried eyes. Elias said he ate too much. Said I was feeding him too often. But the book's mama had said babies need to eat a lot, especially when they're growing. Your mama was right, and Elias is a damn fool. Caleb prepared a second bottle. How old is Micah exactly? 4 months and 6 days. He was born June 10th, which made it mid-October now. Caleb had lost track of dates living alone. Days blurred together when you had nothing but cattle and horses for company. Micah finished the second bottle and promptly spit up all over Caleb's last clean shirt. Caleb stared down at the mess, then started laughing. He couldn't help it. After 7 years of silence and grief, here he was covered in baby vomit, and somehow it felt right. "I'm sorry," Juniper said quickly, anxiously. "He does that sometimes. I should have warned you. I can clean it." "Juniper, it's fine. It's what babies do." Caleb wiped his shirt with a rag, then looked at her seriously. "I need you to understand something. In this house, you don't apologize for normal baby things, or normal child things. Micah can spit up, cry, make messes. You can ask questions, make noise, be a kid. Understand?" She stared at him like he was speaking a foreign language. But Elias said, "I don't give a damn what Elias said. He's not here, and if I have my way, he'll never lay hands on either of you again." Tears welled up in Juniper's eyes. "You mean it? We can really stay?" "I mean it. Even though I can't see right?" She touched her milky left eye self-consciously. "Even though I'm useless?" The rage that went through Caleb was white-hot and blinding. He set Micah down carefully. The baby immediately started gnawing on his fist and knelt in front of Juniper. "Listen to me," he said, his voice rough with suppressed fury. "You are not useless. You are 8 years old." 7, she corrected in a small voice. "I'll be 8 in December." 7 years old, Caleb continued, and you carried your baby brother through a blizzard to save his life. You walked barefoot through snow that would kill grown men. You survived months of abuse and came out the other side still fighting, still protecting the people you love. That's not useless, Juniper. That's the bravest damn thing I've ever seen. She was crying now, silent tears streaming down her thin face. "My eye got hurt in an accident. I fell down the stairs at Elias's house. It's been getting worse. Sometimes everything's blurry. We'll see a doctor. Get it looked at properly." Elias said doctors cost too much. "Elias," Caleb said flatly, "can go straight to hell." Juniper's eyes went wide. Apparently Elias didn't approve of cursing either, and then she giggled. Actually giggled, a sound so unexpected and pure that it made Caleb's chest ache. "Straight to hell," she repeated, testing out the forbidden words. Then more seriously, "Mr. Rowan, what happens when he comes looking for us?" And there it was. The question Caleb had been avoiding. "I don't know," he admitted. "But whatever happens, I won't let him take you back. I promise you that. He's going to be angry, really angry, and he has friends, important friends in town." "So do I." It was only half a lie. Caleb didn't have friends exactly, but he had a reputation. People knew him as a fair man, a hard worker, someone who kept to himself and didn't cause trouble. That had to count for something. Juniper didn't look convinced, but she nodded. "Okay, I trust you." 3 words that shouldn't have meant so much. But they did. They meant everything. The rest of the morning passed in a strange domestic routine. Caleb made breakfast, biscuits and fried salt pork, and watched in satisfaction as Juniper ate like she was starving, which she probably was. He made a mental note. Put weight on this child. Get some meat on those bird bones. After breakfast, he checked her feet properly. The frostbite was there, turning her toes waxy white in places. But it wasn't black. Wasn't dead tissue. With care and time, she'd heal. He soaked her feet in lukewarm water, then wrapped them in clean bandages. Juniper bore it all without complaint, though he could see the pain in her eyes. You're tougher than most men I know, Caleb told her. I don't feel tough. The tough ones never do. By midday, the sun was bright, and the temperature had climbed to something almost bearable. Caleb knew he needed to check on the livestock, make sure the cattle hadn't drifted into dangerous areas during the storm, verify the horses had enough hay. I need to go out to the barn, he told Juniper. Check on the animals. Will you be okay here with Micah for a bit? Fear flashed across her face. What if Elias comes? He won't, not yet. The roads are impassable, and he doesn't know where you are. Caleb picked up his rifle. But I'm leaving this with you. You know how to shoot? No, sir. He hesitated, then decided this wasn't the time for lessons. Then don't touch it unless you absolutely have to. If anyone other than me tries to come through that door, you take Micah and hide in the bedroom. There's a root cellar access under the bed. Lift the rug, and you'll see the trapdoor. You go down there, and you don't come out until I come get you. Understand? Juniper nodded, her face pale but determined. Yes, sir. I'll be an hour at most, probably less. He headed out into the cold, leaving the rifle propped by the fire where Juniper could reach it if needed. The snow came up to his thighs in places, and he had to break trail to the barn. The physical labor felt good, though, grounding. It gave him time to think. The cattle were fine, huddled in the lee of the barn where the snow hadn't drifted quite so deep. He threw down extra hay, checked their water, frozen solid, he'd have to break the ice, and counted heads. All present and accounted for. The horses nickered at him from their stalls. He had 3. Buck, his big bay gelding, Sally, a gentle mare he used for light work, and Thunder, a half-wild Mustang he'd gentled last spring. All 3 were restless, eager to be out after being cooped up during the storm. Soon, Caleb promised them. Let the snow settle a bit first. He was forking hay into Thunder's stall when he heard it. The distant sound of hoofbeats, muffled by snow but unmistakable. Someone was coming. Caleb's hand went to his hip, but his pistol was in the house. Damn it! He grabbed a pitchfork instead. Not much of a weapon, but better than nothing, and moved to the barn door. 3 riders were approaching from the east, picking their way carefully through the drifts. They were still too far off to identify, but Caleb's gut told him this wasn't a friendly visit. He left the barn at a run, plowing through the snow toward the cabin. His lungs burned. His legs screamed, but he didn't slow down. He burst through the cabin door to find Juniper standing by the window, Micah clutched to her chest, her face white with terror. Riders, she gasped. 3 of them. I saw them from the window. I know. Get to the cellar. Now. Is it Elias? I don't know, but we're not taking chances. Go. Juniper didn't argue. She grabbed Micah and ran for the bedroom. Caleb heard the sound of the rug being moved, the trapdoor opening. Then silence. He grabbed his rifle, checked the load, and positioned himself by the window where he had a clear view of the approach. His pistol went into his belt. His knife into his boot. If this was Elias Drummond, if he'd somehow tracked the children through the storm, well, Caleb had made a promise, and he'd die before he broke it. The riders were closer now, close enough to see details. 3 men, all bundled against the cold. The one in front was big, heavy-set, with a thick beard. The 2 behind him were leaner, harder-looking. They moved like men comfortable with violence. They stopped at the fence line, the same fence where Caleb had found Juniper the night before. The big man called out, "Hello, the house! Caleb Rowan, you in there?" Caleb didn't recognize the voice. He cracked the door open, rifle visible, and stepped onto the porch. "I'm here. State your business." The big man nudged his horse forward a few steps. Up close, Caleb could see he was probably in his 50s, with small, mean eyes and hands that looked too soft for ranch work. "Name's Elias Drummond," the man said. "I'm looking for 2 children, a girl and a baby boy. They ran off from my property yesterday during the storm. You seen them?" So this was Elias, the man who'd murdered Juniper's father, stolen their inheritance, beaten a 7-year-old child half-blind. He looked prosperous, well-fed, respectable. He looked like a man who got away with things. "Can't say I have," Caleb said evenly. "Storm was bad. Anyone caught out in it probably didn't make it." Elias's eyes narrowed. "That's a shame, real shame. But I'd like to check your property anyway, just to be sure." "No." The word hung in this cold air like a gunshot. No? Elias's voice hardened. Now see here, Rowan. I said no. This is private property, and you're not welcome on it. You want to search for lost children, you get the sheriff and a warrant. Otherwise, you turn around and ride back to wherever the hell you came from. One of the lean men behind Elias shifted in his saddle, his hand moving toward his hip. Caleb's rifle came up in a smooth, practiced motion, the barrel pointing directly at the man's chest. I wouldn't, Caleb said softly. The man froze. Elias held up a placating hand. Now, no need for hostility. I'm just a concerned guardian looking for two helpless children. The girl, Juniper. She's simple in the head, weak-minded. She gets confused, wanders off. And the baby, well, he needs medicine, special medicine. Without it, he could die. It was all lies, smooth as silk and twice as slippery. Caleb could see how it would play in town. Poor Elias Drummond, trying to save his wards from their own ignorance and misfortune. Like I said, Caleb repeated, his voice hard. Haven't seen them. Now get off my land. Elias studied him for a long moment. Then he smiled, and it was the smile of a snake sizing up a mouse. You know, Rowan, people in town talk about you. Say you're a recluse, unfriendly, maybe a little crazy since your wife died. Some folks wonder if you're dangerous. Some folks should mind their own damn business. Just saying, if two children were to disappear and then show up here at the home of a known recluse with a history of instability, Elias let the implication hang. Well, that would look bad. Real bad. The threat was clear. If Caleb admitted to having the children, Elias would spin it as kidnapping or worse. He'd use Caleb's grief and isolation against him, paint him as a madman who'd stolen two innocent children. It was clever, vicious, but clever. You done? Caleb asked. For now. But Rowan, I'll be watching, and if I find out you're lying to me, if I find out you have those children, Elias leaned forward in his saddle. Well, accidents happen, especially out here in the wilderness. Fires, collapses, men getting shot by their own guns while cleaning them. Tragic accidents. The two lean men smiled. They weren't ranch hands. They were hired guns, bought and paid for. Caleb didn't flinch. Message received. Now get the fuck off my property before I shoot you for trespassing. For a moment he thought Elias might push it, might call his bluff or send his men forward. The tension stretched tight as a bowstring. Then Elias laughed. You always were a stubborn son of a bitch, Rowan. Fine, we'll go, but this isn't over, not by a long shot. He wheeled his horse around and spurred it back toward the road, his men following. Caleb stood on the porch, rifle ready, and watched them until they disappeared over the rise. Only then did he allow himself to breathe. He went back inside, barred the door, and called down into the cellar. Juniper, they're gone. You can come up. A moment later, the trapdoor creaked open. Juniper climbed out, still clutching Micah, her face streaked with tears. That was him, she whispered. That was Elias. I heard his voice. I know. He said I'm simple, weak-minded. He tells everyone that. Ever since my eye got bad, he tells people I'm stupid. Her voice shook with a mixture of fear and fury. I'm not stupid, Mr. Rowan. I can read and write and do sums. Mama taught me. I'm not stupid. I know you're not. Caleb set the rifle down and knelt in front of her. Elias lies, Juniper, about everything. He lied about your father's death. He lied about the inheritance, and he's lying about you. Do you understand? Nothing he says is true. But people believe him. He's important. He has friends. So we'll find people who'll believe us, people who care about the truth. Even as he said it, doubt gnawed at him. Elias had resources, connections, hired guns. What did Caleb have? A remote ranch, a reputation for being difficult, and 7 years of self-imposed isolation. This was going to be a fight. A bad one. Juniper seemed to read his thoughts. You're scared. I'm concerned, Caleb corrected. There's a difference. What are we going to do? Good question. Caleb stood, thinking hard. Elias knew the children were here now, or at least strongly suspected it. He wouldn't have made those threats otherwise, which meant they were running out of time. We need proof, Caleb said slowly. Proof that Elias killed your father. Proof that he stole the inheritance. Something solid that we can take to the authorities. The papers, Juniper said suddenly. Papa's papers. The ones about the mine shares and the bank account. He kept them in a strongbox in his office. Elias took the strongbox after Papa died, but I saw where he hid it. Where? In his house. In the study, behind the false panel in the bookshelf. I saw him put it there one night. She looked up at Caleb with desperate hope. If we could get those papers… Hold on, you're talking about breaking into Elias Drummond's house. Yes. That's insane. It's the only way. Juniper's jaw set in a stubborn line that reminded Caleb painfully of Emily. Those papers prove the inheritance exists. They prove Elias lied. Without them, it's just his word against ours, and he's important, and we're nobody. She was right. Damn it, she was right. Even if we could get in, Caleb said, even if we found the papers, it would be dangerous. Elias has men, guns. I know, but it's the only chance we have, otherwise he'll just keep coming. He'll keep threatening. And eventually… She didn't finish, but she didn't have to. Eventually, Elias would win, because men like Elias always won when nobody stood up to them. Caleb ran a hand through his hair, thinking. It was crazy. Suicidal, even. But what was the alternative? Sit here and wait for Elias to bring the law down on them? Wait for those hired guns to come back in the middle of the night? Let me think about it, he said finally. In the meantime, we need supplies from town, food, medicine for your feet, proper diapers for Micah. And we need to talk to the sheriff, feel him out, see whose side he's on. What if he's on Elias's side? Then we'll know what we're dealing with. They spent the rest of the afternoon preparing. Caleb hitched Buck to the small sleigh he used for winter transport and loaded it with furs to trade. Juniper stayed inside with Micah, watching from the window with anxious eyes. I'll be back before dark, Caleb promised. You remember what to do if anyone comes? Hide in the cellar. Don't come out until you get back. Good girl. The ride to Copper Falls took 2 hours through the snow-choked roads. The town was small, maybe 300 people if you counted the outlying ranches, but it had the essentials: general store, saloon, church, sheriff's office, and a doctor who was drunk more often than not, but still technically functional. Caleb tied Buck outside the general store and went in. The proprietor, a thin man named Harris, looked up from his ledger. Caleb Rowan. Haven't seen you in months. Thought maybe the winter had finally got you. Not yet, Harris. I need supplies. He gave his list: canned milk, eggs, flour, sugar, bandages, laudanum for pain, and with some embarrassment, cloth diapers. Harris's eyebrows climbed his forehead at that last item. Diapers? You got a baby out at your place, Caleb? Just get the supplies, Harris. Sure, just making conversation. But his eyes were curious, speculative. By nightfall, the whole town would know Caleb Rowan had bought baby diapers. While Harris gathered the items, Caleb wandered over to the notice board by the door. The usual postings: land for sale, work wanted, church services. And then, near the bottom, something that made his blood run cold. A notice, handwritten in neat script. Missing, 2 children, wards of Elias Drummond, Juniper Hale, age 7, brown hair, impaired vision. Micah Hale, age 4 months, dark hair, last seen October 16th during blizzard. Likely disoriented and in danger. $50 reward for information leading to their safe return. Contact E. Drummond, Copper Falls. $50. That was more than most people in Copper Falls made in 3 months. Someone would talk. Someone always talked when money was involved. Caleb tore the notice down and stuffed it in his pocket. Hey, Harris protested. That's town property. Bill it to Elias Drummond. I'm sure he can afford it. He paid for his supplies, loaded them into the sleigh, and headed for the sheriff's office. Time to find out where the law stood. Sheriff Tom Brennan was in his 50s, grizzled and weathered with more scars than teeth. He'd been sheriff for 15 years and had a reputation for being fair but unimaginative. He looked up as Caleb entered, surprise crossing his face. Caleb Rowan, this is unexpected. Sheriff, got a minute? For you, always. Have a seat. Coffee? No thanks. Caleb remained standing. I want to ask you about Elias Drummond. Brennan's expression shuddered immediately. What about him? What kind of man is he? Respected, successful, runs a good business, treats his workers fair, donates to the church. Brennan leaned back in his chair. Why do you ask? Just curious. He came by my place this morning, looking for 2 children who ran off. Yeah, I heard about that. Terrible thing. Poor man's beside himself with worry. Is he? Caleb kept his voice neutral. What do you know about the children? Orphans. Their daddy died in a wagon accident last summer. Drummond took them in out of Christian charity, even though he didn't have to. Girl's got something wrong with her head, Drummond says. Wanders off, gets confused, probably didn't understand the storm was dangerous. It was the story Elias had spun, word for word, and Brennan believed it. Caleb could see it in his eyes. Did you investigate the father's death? Caleb asked. Brennan frowned. Why would I? It was an accident. Wagon wheel broke. These things happen. Did you examine the wagon? Caleb, what the hell are you getting at? Just asking questions, Sheriff. Well, stop. Brennan stood, his hand moving unconsciously toward the gun at his hip. You got something to say about Elias Drummond? You say it plain. Otherwise, don't waste my time with insinuations. Caleb studied him. Brennan wasn't corrupt, he decided. Just lazy and predisposed to believe the word of a prosperous white businessman over anything else. He'd close ranks around Elias because that was easier than asking hard questions. Never mind, Caleb said. Forget I asked. He turned to go. Rowan? Brennan's voice stopped him at the door. Those children show up at your place, you let me know. Immediately. Understood? Understood. Caleb walked out into the cold afternoon, his gut churning with anger and frustration. The sheriff was useless, worse than useless. He was actively on Elias's side, which meant they were on their own. He was loading the last of the supplies into the sleigh when he heard a voice behind him. Mr. Rowan? He turned to find a woman standing there. She was maybe 30, with dark hair and kind eyes, wrapped in a threadbare shawl against the cold. Yes? My name is Mary Chen. I worked for the Hale family, for Juniper and Micah's father, before he died. Caleb's pulse quickened. Go on. Mary looked around nervously, then stepped closer. I heard you asking about Elias Drummond, about the children, and I think you should know, Mr. Hale's death wasn't an accident. You have proof? Not proof, but I was there the day before. I saw Mr. Drummond checking the wagon, and I saw... She swallowed hard. I saw him do something to the wheel, loosen something. I didn't think much of it at the time, but then the next day, when Mr. Hale died... Why didn't you go to the sheriff? I did. He said I was mistaken, said I was just a hysterical woman grieving her employer. Drummond had witnesses who said they'd examined the wagon and found nothing suspicious. Her eyes filled with tears. But I know what I saw, Mr. Rowan. And after Mr. Hale died, Drummond fired me, told me there was no money to pay servants anymore. But I know that's a lie. Mr. Hale was a wealthy man. Did you tell anyone else? I tried. But who listens to a Chinese seamstress over a respected businessman? She grabbed Caleb's arm. But if you have those children, if you're trying to protect them, please, don't let Drummond take them back. He's evil, truly evil. I've seen the way he treated Juniper, the bruises, and the things he said about selling the baby. He talked about that. To his men. They thought I didn't understand English well enough to follow the conversation. But I heard. He was planning to sell that baby to someone out east. Told his men it would fetch a good price, healthy infant like that. Mary's voice shook with rage and grief. Please, Mr. Rowan, save them. Caleb squeezed her hand. I'm trying, but I need evidence. Real evidence that will stand up in court. The papers. Mr. Hale's papers about the inheritance. They're in a strongbox in Drummond's study. If you could get them, you know about the strongbox. I cleaned that house for 2 years after Mr. Hale died. I know where everything is. She pulled a piece of paper from her pocket. This is a layout of Drummond's house. The study, the strongbox location, the servant's entrance that's never locked. If you're planning what I think you're planning, this might help. Caleb took the paper, tucked it into his coat. Thank you, Mrs. Chen. This is brave of you. It's not brave. It's right. She stepped back, wrapping her shawl tighter. Good luck, Mr. Rowan. Those children deserve better than what they've gotten. She disappeared into the crowd before Caleb could respond. He climbed into the sleigh and started back toward the ranch, his mind racing. He had confirmation now. Another witness who believed Elias had murdered James Hale. He had a map of Drummond's house, and he had 2 children depending on him to do the impossible. The sun was setting by the time he got home, painting the snow gold and crimson. He could see smoke rising from the cabin chimney, and for just a moment it felt like coming home used to feel. Like there was someone waiting for him, someone who'd be glad he was back. Juniper met him at the door, Micah in her arms, relief flooding her face. "You're back. I was worried." "Told you I would be." "How's Micah?" "Fussy. I think his stomach hurts. Probably gas. Babies get that." Caleb unloaded the supplies, then showed Juniper the proper diapers. "These will work better than torn-up shirts." Her eyes lit up. "Real diapers." "Thank you, Mr. Rowan." Over dinner, salt pork and beans, nothing fancy, Caleb told her about his conversation with the sheriff and his encounter with Mary Chen. Juniper listened intently, her damaged eyes sharp with intelligence. "Mrs. Chen is kind," she said. "She used to sneak me extra food when Elias wasn't looking, and she believed me about my eye, about it being more than just an accident." "What do you mean?" Juniper's hand went to her face. "I told you I fell down the stairs." "That's true. But Elias pushed me. He was angry because I asked about Papa's papers. He pushed me, and I fell. And I hit my head on the banister. My eye's been bad ever since." The rage was back, hot and lethal. "Jesus, Juniper. It's okay. It doesn't hurt anymore, just blurry sometimes." It wasn't okay. None of this was okay. "We're getting those papers," Caleb said. "Tomorrow night. Mary gave me a map of the house, and you know where the strongbox is hidden. Between the 2 of us, we can do this." "You mean it? We're really going?" "We don't have a choice. Elias has the sheriff in his pocket, and without proof, we can't fight him. So yes, we're going." Juniper set down her fork, her face deadly serious. "Mr. Rowan, if something happens to you, if Elias's men hurt you because of us, nothing's going to happen to me. But if it does, promise me you'll make sure Micah is safe, that someone good takes him, not Elias, not an orphanage, someone who'll love him." Caleb reached across the table and took her small hand in his. "I promise, but it won't come to that. We're all getting through this together, all 3 of us." That night, after the children were asleep, Caleb sat by the fire and cleaned his guns. The rifle, the pistol, the shotgun he kept for hunting. He checked ammunition, sharpened his knife, prepared like he was going to war. Because maybe he was. Elias Drummond had money, power, hired guns, and the law on his side. Caleb had a ramshackle ranch, a tarnished reputation, and 2 terrified children. But he also had something Elias didn't. He had the truth, and he had a promise to keep. Tomorrow night, they'd break into Elias Drummond's house and steal back what was rightfully Juniper and Micah's. And if Elias tried to stop them, well, Caleb had killed men before, back during his time as a cavalry scout in the Indian Wars. He wasn't proud of it, but he remembered how. And for these children, for this makeshift family that had found him in the storm, he'd do whatever it took. Even if it meant becoming the dangerous man people whispered about. Even if it meant burning everything down. The plan was simple, which meant it would probably go straight to hell. Caleb spent the morning of the next day watching Elias Drummond's house from a distance, memorizing the patterns. 2 guards at the front gate, rotating every 4 hours. Lamps lit in the study until around 10 at night, then darkness. The servants' entrance on the east side, just like Mary Chen had said, with a door that didn't quite latch properly. He rode back to the ranch as the sun began its descent, his mind turning over every detail, every possible thing that could go wrong. Juniper was waiting on the porch, Micah bundled against her chest in a sling Caleb had fashioned from an old shirt. "Well?" she asked. "It's risky, but doable." Caleb dismounted and led Buck to the barn. "We go in around midnight when the house is quiet. Get the papers and get out. 20 minutes, maybe less." "What about me and Micah?" "You stay here. Hidden in the cellar." Juniper's jaw set in that stubborn line he was beginning to recognize. "No, I'm coming with you." "Absolutely not. It's too dangerous." I know where the strongbox is. I know the house. And what if you get caught and can't come back? What if something happens and Micah and I are just sitting here waiting?" Her voice cracked slightly. "I can't lose someone else, Mr. Rowan. I can't sit and wait and not know, please." Caleb wanted to argue, wanted to put his foot down and be the adult making the safe, sensible decision. But looking at her face, at the desperate need to be part of her own rescue, he understood. She'd been powerless for so long, helpless while her mother died, while her father was murdered, while Elias beat her and stole everything. She needed this, needed to fight back. "All right," he said quietly. "But Micah stays here. We can't take a baby on a burglary. Where will he be safe?" That was the question that had been gnawing at Caleb all day. He couldn't leave an infant alone, but he couldn't risk Micah crying at the wrong moment, giving them away. "I might know someone," he said slowly. "Someone we can trust." 2 hours later, they were riding toward the edge of Blackfoot territory, where the tribal lands bordered the ranch country. Caleb had traded with Chief Tall Elk's people for years, maintaining a respectful distance but cordial relations. The Blackfoot had been pushed onto smaller and smaller parcels of land, their traditional hunting grounds stolen by treaties written in bad faith. But they endured. They survived. And Caleb knew that if anyone understood protecting children from corrupt white men, it would be them. They found the encampment as the sun touched the horizon, a cluster of lodges arranged in a circle, smoke rising from cook fires. Dogs barked as they approached. Children playing near the edge of camp stopped to stare. A warrior stepped forward, rifle in hand but not raised. He was young, maybe 25, with a scar across his cheek and eyes that had seen too much. "Caleb Rowan," the warrior said in accented English, "you come far from your lands." "I need to speak with Chief Tall Elk. It's important." The warrior studied Juniper, then Micah. Something shifted in his expression. "The children. We heard stories. That Drummond searches for them." "You know Elias Drummond?" "We know many things the white men think we do not." The warrior gestured toward the largest lodge. "Come. The chief will see you." Chief Tall Elk was ancient, his face a map of wrinkles, his hair white as the snow outside. But his eyes were sharp as obsidian, missing nothing. He sat by his fire, wrapped in a buffalo robe, and gestured for Caleb to sit. "You bring children to my lodge," Tall Elk said in perfect, unaccented English. "Children who run from the man with poison in his heart." Caleb blinked. "You know about Elias?" "I know he killed their father. I know he steals what is not his. I know many things." Tall Elk's gaze moved to Juniper. "Child, come here." Juniper hesitated, then moved closer. Tall Elk studied her face, her damaged eye, the fading bruises on her arms. He made a sound deep in his throat. "The white man's law protects men like Drummond," he said. "It does not protect children, especially not children with nowhere to run." "I'm trying to change that," Caleb said, "but I need help. Tonight I'm going to break into Drummond's house and steal back papers that prove he murdered their father and took their inheritance. But I can't take the baby. He's too young, too vulnerable. I need someone to watch him for a few hours, someone I can trust." "And you trust us? The savages?" There was bitter irony in Tall Elk's voice. "I trust you more than I trust most white men in Copper Falls." Tall Elk was silent for a long moment. Then he gestured to a woman sitting near the fire, younger, maybe 40, with kind eyes and strong hands. "This is Morning Bird. She raised 6 children of her own. The baby will be safe with her." Morning Bird came forward and held out her arms. Juniper clutched Micah tighter for a moment, her eyes filling with tears. Then, slowly, she handed him over. "His name is Micah," Juniper whispered. "He likes to be rocked, and he gets fussy if he's too warm." Morning Bird nodded solemnly. "I will guard him with my life, little one. This I promise." Micah, perhaps sensing the genuine warmth, didn't cry. He just looked up at Morning Bird with those serious dark eyes and made a small cooing sound. "We'll be back before dawn," Caleb said. "If you are not," Tall Elk said, "the child will still be protected. We do not abandon the helpless, whatever your white law may do." There was weight in those words, a promise that went deeper than just one night. Caleb and Juniper rode through the darkness toward Copper Falls, the temperature dropping with each passing hour. Juniper was quiet, her hands gripping the saddle horn with white-knuckled tension. "You scared?" Caleb asked. "Terrified." "Good. Scared keeps you sharp, keeps you careful." They left Buck tied in a grove of trees a quarter-mile from Drummond's house and approached on foot. The mansion, and it was a mansion, 3 stories of ostentatious wealth, loomed against the night sky. Lights burned in a few windows on the ground floor. The guards at the front gate were visible, their cigarettes glowing like fireflies. Caleb and Juniper circled around to the east side, moving through the shadows. The servants' entrance was exactly where Mary had marked it, a plain wooden door half hidden behind a rose trellis. Caleb tested the handle. It turned easily. They slipped inside. The interior was dark, lit only by moonlight filtering through windows. They were in a narrow hallway that smelled of cooking grease and lye soap. The servants' area. Mary's map showed the study was on the first floor, west wing. They moved silently through the house, Juniper leading now, her damaged vision somehow not hampering her in the familiar space. She navigated by memory, by touch, her hand occasionally reaching out to brush a wall or door frame. They reached the study without incident. The door was closed but unlocked. Caleb eased it open, every nerve screaming for them to run, to get out while they still could. The study was large, lined with bookshelves, dominated by a massive oak desk. And there, behind the desk, was the bookshelf Mary had marked, the one with the false panel. Juniper went straight to it, her fingers finding a particular spine. She pulled, and a section of the shelf swung outward with a soft click. Behind it was a strong box, maybe 18 inches square, made of heavy steel. "Locked," Caleb muttered. He'd brought tools for this, lockpicks he'd learned to use during his army days. He set to work, his fingers remembering the skill despite years of disuse. The lock was good, but not good enough. After 2 minutes of careful manipulation, something clicked. The strongbox opened. Inside were papers, lots of them, deeds, bank statements, contracts. Caleb grabbed them all, shoving them into the leather satchel he'd brought. "Is this everything?" he whispered. Juniper nodded, her eyes wide in the darkness. "That's Papa's writing, on the bank statements. I recognize it." They had the evidence, now they just needed to get out. Caleb closed the strongbox, swung the false panel back into place, and turned toward the door. It opened. A man stood there, silhouetted against the hall light. Not Elias. One of the guards, his hand going for his pistol. "What the hell?" Caleb moved on instinct, crossing the distance in 2 strides and slamming the butt of his pistol into the guard's temple. The man dropped like a stone. "Run!" Caleb hissed. They ran. Behind them someone shouted. A bell began ringing, loud and insistent. More voices, more footsteps. Caleb and Juniper burst out of the servants' entrance and sprinted for the trees. Shots rang out, bullets whipping past them in the darkness. Juniper stumbled, nearly fell, but Caleb grabbed her arm and hauled her forward. They reached the grove where Buck waited. Caleb threw Juniper into the saddle and swung up behind her, spurring the horse into a gallop. More shots. One struck a tree inches from Caleb's head, spraying bark. But then they were past the fence line, into open country, and Buck was running full out, his hooves thundering against frozen ground. They didn't stop until they reached the Blackfoot encampment. Warriors appeared from the darkness, weapons ready, but relaxed when they saw Caleb's face. Juniper practically fell off the horse and ran to Morningbird, who was standing outside her lodge with Micah in her arms. The baby was awake but calm, making small, happy sounds. "Micah!" Juniper sobbed, taking him. "Oh, Micah!" Caleb dismounted, his hands shaking with adrenaline. Chief Tall Elk emerged from his lodge, taking in the scene with those ancient, knowing eyes. "You succeeded," he said. It wasn't a question. "We got the papers. But they know it was us. Drummond will come looking." "Let him come." Tall Elk's voice was hard as granite. "These children are under our protection now. Blackfoot protection. Let the poison-hearted man try to take them from us." "Chief, I appreciate that, but I can't ask you to start a war over—" "You do not ask. We offer." Tall Elk gestured to the satchel. "Show me these papers." They moved into the chief's lodge. Caleb spread the documents out by firelight, and Tall Elk studied them with surprising literacy. His finger traced the numbers on the bank statements, the signatures on the deeds. This man Hale, Tall Elk said slowly, he owned much. Mining shares, land, money in the white man's bank. He looked up. The child inherits this? Both children, Caleb said. Juniper and Micah. It should all be theirs, but Elias claimed their father died with debts, took everything for himself. Lies built on murder. Tall Elk's expression was grim. The white man's justice will not punish him. The white man's courts protect their own. Maybe, but these documents prove... A commotion outside interrupted him. Voices shouting in Blackfoot, urgent and alarmed. A warrior burst into the lodge. Riders approaching from the south. Many riders, armed. Caleb's blood went cold. How many? 10, maybe more. They carry torches. Drummond. The son of a bitch had tracked them here. Tall Elk rose smoothly, despite his age. So, the poison heart comes to our lands uninvited. He turned to Caleb. Take the children to the center of camp. Keep them safe. Chief, this is my fight. No. Tall Elk's voice cracked like a whip. This is now our fight. These children asked for our protection. We gave it. That is sacred. He moved to the lodge entrance, then paused. But Caleb Rowan, if shooting starts, you may shoot too. Warriors were gathering, maybe 30 of them, armed with rifles, bows, knives. They formed a line between the approaching riders and the camp, faces hard and unforgiving. Caleb positioned himself behind them, Juniper and Micah pressed against his side. He could see the torches now, bobbing in the darkness like angry stars. The riders stopped at the edge of camp. Elias Drummond was at their head, flanked by his hired guns and several men Caleb recognized from town. The firelight made Elias's face look demonic, all harsh shadows and sharp edges. Chief Tall Elk, Elias called out, his voice dripping false courtesy. I apologize for the late hour, but I'm looking for 2 children, white children. They were stolen from my home tonight by a criminal named Caleb Rowan. Tall Elk stepped forward. You come to our lands with guns and torches and speak of theft? You, who have stolen more from us than can ever be repaid. This is different. Those children are under my legal guardianship. Rowan kidnapped them. He's a dangerous man, unstable, possibly insane. I'm asking, as one leader to another, that you return the children to me. We ask nothing of you, Tall Elk said flatly. You ask nothing of us. Leave our lands. Elias's facade cracked slightly. Now see here. You murder a father, you beat a child, you steal what is not yours. Tall Elk's voice rose, carrying across the cold night air. And now you come here with threats, expecting us to help you continue these crimes? No. The children stay. You leave. One of the hired guns shifted in his saddle. Chief, we don't want trouble, but we will take those kids, one way or another. 30 rifles came up in perfect unison. The metallic click of hammers being cocked was deafening. You wish to start a war tonight? Tall Elk asked calmly. You wish to attack us on our own lands, murder us in front of witnesses, and expect there will be no consequences? Elias's face had gone pale. This is absurd. I'm a respected businessman. I have the law on my side. Your law does not reach here. This is tribal land, granted by treaty. Our land, our law. Tall Elk took a step forward. Now leave. Before we decide that treaty or no treaty, some crimes must be answered immediately. For a long moment, no one moved. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Caleb's hand tightened on his pistol, ready for the first shot. Then Elias wheeled his horse around. This isn't over. I'll go to the territorial governor, the federal marshals. I'll have the army here if I have to. Do what you must, Tall Elk said. We are accustomed to the white man's broken promises and hollow threats. Elias and his men rode off into the darkness, their torches disappearing like dying embers. Caleb let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Juniper was shaking against him, silent tears streaming down her face. Thank you, Caleb said to Tall Elk, for standing with us. We did not stand with you, Caleb Rowan. The chief's eyes were unreadable. We stood with children who had no one else, as we always have, as we always will, for as long as our people endure. They spent the night in the camp. Caleb couldn't sleep, his mind racing through possibilities and problems. Elias would make good on his threats. He'd go to the territorial authorities, spin his story, paint Caleb as a kidnapper, and the Blackfoot as savages harboring criminals. But they had the papers now. Evidence that could prove everything. The question was, who would listen? As dawn broke cold and gray, Chief Tall Elk summoned Caleb to his lodge. The old man looked tired, as if he'd aged a decade overnight. "Sit," he said. "We must talk of serious things." Caleb sat, accepting the cup of bitter tea Morning Bird offered. "The children cannot stay here forever," Tall Elk said bluntly. "Our protection is real, but limited. Drummond will bring soldiers eventually, will claim we kidnapped white children, and soldiers do not care about truth or justice when it comes to us." "I know, but where else can they go?" "That is the question." Tall Elk sipped his tea. "Tell me, Caleb Rowan, why do you fight for these children? They are not your blood, not your responsibility." Caleb was quiet for a moment, thinking of Emily, of the baby they'd lost, born too early, too small, never drawing breath, of 7 years spent in a cabin that echoed with absence. "Because someone has to," he said finally. "Because they're children, and they deserve better than what they've gotten. Because—" He stopped, surprised by the emotion in his throat. "Because maybe they can save me as much as I'm trying to save them." Tall Elk nodded slowly. "Truth at last. That is good." He set down his tea. "The children need more than protection, Caleb Rowan. They need a home, a real home, with someone who will raise them, love them, fight for them. Are you that someone?" I don't know if I can be. I'm just a rancher, alone. I don't know anything about raising kids. And yet here you are, already raising them." Tall Elk's gaze was penetrating. "The girl trusts you. The baby knows your smell, your voice. You feed them, protect them. What is that, if not raising them? It's temporary, until we figure out something permanent." "Why must it be temporary?" The question hung in the air. Why indeed? What was stopping Caleb from making this permanent, from truly becoming these children's father? Fear, he realized. Fear of failing them the way he'd failed Emily and their baby. Fear of loving something and losing it again. "I see the fear in you," Tall Elk said gently. "It is the fear of a man who has lost much. But Caleb Rowan, loss is certain. It comes for all of us in time. The only question is whether we let fear of loss prevent us from living, from loving, from trying." Before Caleb could respond, a warrior entered the lodge, his face urgent. "Chief, riders from town. They carry a white flag. They wish to speak." Tall Elk and Caleb exchanged glances. "Not Drummond?" "No, the town marshal, and others." They emerged from the lodge to find 5 riders approaching slowly, a white cloth tied to a pole. The marshal, a lean man named Pike, dismounted carefully, hands visible and empty. "Chief Tall Elk, Mr. Rowan, I come in peace to talk." "Speak," Tall Elk said. Pike cleared his throat. "There's been an incident in town. Last night while Drummond was out here, someone set fire to the courthouse. The records office burned. Deeds, birth certificates, death records, all gone." Caleb's stomach dropped. "All of them?" "Every last one." Pike looked grim. "Real convenient timing, don't you think? Especially since those records would have included documentation about James Hale's death and estate." "Drummond," Caleb said. "Can't prove it. But yes, I'd bet money on it." Pike shifted uncomfortably. "Look, Sheriff Brennan is in Drummond's pocket. Everyone knows it. But I'm not. And neither are some other folks in town. We've been hearing rumors about Drummond for years, how he always seems to profit when others have accidents, how he treats his workers. But without proof—" "We have proof." Caleb gestured back toward the lodge. "Documents from Drummond's own safe. Bank statements, deeds, everything." Pike's eyes widened. "You broke into his house." "I retrieved stolen property." "That's still breaking and entering, could land you in jail." "Only if someone presses charges," Tall Elk interjected, and only if your white courts have jurisdiction over what happens on tribal land. Pike rubbed his face. This is a mess, a hell of a mess. He looked at Caleb. Drummond's already filing complaints. Says you kidnapped those kids, turned them against him with lies. He's got half the town believing his story. And the other half? Starting to have doubts, especially after the courthouse burned. People remember that Drummond had the most to lose if those records were examined closely. Pike paused. I need to see those documents. If they're real, if they prove what you say they prove, I might be able to get the territorial judge involved, someone who doesn't have ties to Drummond. And if the judge is in Drummond's pocket too, then we're all screwed. Pike's voice was hard. But it's the only legal option we've got. Caleb looked at Tall Elk, who nodded slightly. They brought Pike into the lodge and showed him the papers. The marshal read through them carefully, his expression growing darker with each page. Jesus Christ, he breathed. He stole everything. $40,000 in mining shares, land deeds. The bank account alone had enough to keep those kids comfortable for life. He looked up. This is murder and theft. Clear as day. Will it hold up in court? Caleb asked. It should. These are original documents, signed and notarized. They prove the inheritance existed and that Drummond had access to it. Pike gathered the papers carefully. But Drummond's going to fight this with everything he has. He'll call you a thief, a liar, maybe even claim you forged these. They came from his own safe, which you broke into. See the problem? Pike stood. I'll take these to Judge Harrison in Helena. He's honest, far as I know, but it'll take time. Days, maybe weeks. Meanwhile, you and the kids need to stay safe. Stay here if the chief allows it. They may stay, Tall Elk said, but there is another matter to address. What's that? The children need a permanent guardian, someone the white courts will recognize. Otherwise, even if Drummond is arrested, they will be placed in an orphanage or with another appointed guardian. Pike nodded slowly. That's true, unless someone petitions for legal custody. Could I? Caleb asked. I'm not married, not wealthy. You're a property owner, a citizen. You have no criminal record. Pike considered. It's unusual for a single man to adopt, but not impossible, especially if the children request it and the judge agrees. He looked at Caleb seriously. But you'd better be sure, Rowan. Adopting kids is permanent. It's not something you can undo when it gets hard. Caleb thought of Juniper's trust, of Micah's small weight in his arms, of the way the cabin had felt less empty with their presence. I'm sure, he said. But even as he said it, doubt gnawed at him. Was he really father material? Could he give these children what they needed? Pike left with the documents, promising to return as soon as he had word from the judge. The camp settled into uneasy waiting. Caleb helped with camp chores, learning from the Blackfoot ways of doing things. Juniper stayed close to Morningbird, absorbing comfort and practical wisdom. Micah was passed from woman to woman, each one cooing over him, making him laugh with games and songs. It should have been peaceful, but Caleb couldn't shake the feeling that a storm was coming. 3 days later, the storm arrived. It was mid-afternoon when the sentries spotted them, riders approaching from multiple directions, not just Drummond's men this time, official riders, soldiers in blue uniforms. Elias had made good on his threat. He'd brought the cavalry. The camp erupted into controlled chaos, warriors taking positions, women and children moving to the center. Caleb grabbed his rifle and found Tall Elk. How many? He asked. 40 soldiers, plus Drummond and his men. Maybe 60 total. Tall Elk's face was carved from stone. They mean to take the children by force. We can't fight the army. That's suicide. Then what do you propose? Before Caleb could answer, a white flag appeared. A soldier rode forward alone, stopping at the camp's edge. I carry a message from Colonel Briggs. He wishes to speak with Chief Tall Elk and Caleb Rowan, under flag of truce. Tall Elk nodded. They walked out to meet the colonel, a grizzled veteran with more scars than sympathy. Chief, Rowan. Briggs's voice was clipped, professional. I'm here under orders from the territorial governor. Elias Drummond has filed a formal complaint alleging kidnapping and theft. He's demanded the return of his wards and your arrest, Rowan. Those children aren't his wards, Caleb said. I don't care about the details. I have orders. Turn over the children and surrender yourself for arrest. or I'll take this camp by force. You would attack peaceful people on their own land? Tall Elk's voice was ice. Break treaties? Start a war? I would follow orders. Briggs's expression flickered with something, doubt, regret, but his voice remained firm. You have 1 hour to comply. They walked back to camp in heavy silence. Around them, warriors checked weapons, said quiet goodbyes to children. Everyone knew what refusing the army meant. Caleb felt sick. This was his fault. He'd brought this down on people who'd only tried to help. Chief, let me surrender. Give them the children. Maybe once the judge sees the evidence. No. Tall Elk's voice was absolute. That is not how this ends. Then how does it end? You can't fight the army. They'll destroy the camp, kill people. Perhaps. Tall Elk stopped walking and turned to face Caleb. Or perhaps there is another way. An old way. One the white soldiers must respect. What way? The children claim our protection, yes? Yes. Then let them truly claim it. Through the old ritual, the adoption ceremony. Tall Elk's eyes gleamed. If they are adopted into the tribe, become Blackfoot in the eyes of our law and our spirits, then they are ours to protect. The treaty grants us that right, to determine who is and is not part of our nation. Caleb's pulse quickened. Would that actually work? The treaties say it must. Whether the white soldiers honor their own words, Tall Elk shrugged. That remains to be seen. What does the ceremony involve? Questions, 3 sacred questions, asked of the one who would become guardian. The answers must be true, must come from the heart. If they are false, the spirits will know, and the adoption will fail. And if I fail? Then we have no choice but to surrender or fight. Tall Elk gripped Caleb's shoulder. But I do not think you will fail, Caleb Rowan. Your heart is already theirs. You need only speak it aloud. The tribe gathered in a circle as the sun began to set. Juniper stood beside Caleb, holding Micah, her eyes huge and frightened. Warriors ringed the outside, facing outward, watching the army that waited beyond. Tall Elk stood in the center, arms raised, speaking in Blackfoot, then in English for Caleb's benefit. We gather to witness an adoption, to bind souls not by blood, but by choice, by love, by sacred promise. He turned to Caleb. Caleb Rowan, you wish to become father to these children? Caleb's throat was tight. I do. Then answer the 3 questions. Answer with truth, or the spirits will reject you. The camp fell silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. First question, Tall Elk intoned. Why do you seek to become father? What do you hope to gain? Caleb thought of all the easy lies he could tell. Noble lies about duty and justice. But Tall Elk had said truth, so truth it would be. I lost a child once, he said quietly. Lost my wife, lost the baby we made together, lost everything I thought my life would be. I've been half dead for 7 years, just going through motions. These children, they make me feel alive again. They make me want to be better, to try. His voice cracked. I don't know if I'll be a good father. I'm scared I'll fail them, but I want to try. I want them, not to replace what I lost, but to have something new, something real, a family. Tall Elk nodded slowly. Second question, what will you sacrifice for these children? Everything, Caleb said without hesitation. My safety, my solitude, my life, if it comes to that. Whatever they need, I'll give it, however I can. Third question. Tall Elk's voice dropped, became almost gentle. What will you teach them of their pain, of the suffering they have endured? Caleb looked at Juniper, at her damaged eye and thin frame and too old expression, at Micah, innocent and helpless. What could he teach them about pain? I'll teach them that pain doesn't define them, he said slowly, that they're stronger than what hurt them, that they survived, and survival matters. But I'll also teach them. He stopped, surprised by the tears on his face. I'll teach them that it's okay to hurt, to be angry, to grieve, that healing isn't forgetting, that they don't have to be okay all the time. And I'll teach them that they're loved, even broken, even scared, especially then. Silence. long and deep. Then Tall Elk smiled. It transformed his ancient face, made him look younger, lighter. The spirits accept your answers. Your heart is true. He turned to Juniper. Child, do you accept this man as father? Juniper looked up at Caleb with tears streaming down her face. Yes, yes, I do. And does the baby accept? As if on cue, Micah reached out his small arms toward Caleb, making grabbing motions. The tribe laughed, the sound warm and real. Tall Elk placed his hand on Caleb's head, then on each child. He spoke in Blackfoot, words that Caleb didn't understand but felt in his bones. Ancient words, powerful words. It is done, Tall Elk announced. In the eyes of the Blackfoot Nation, these children are yours. Juniper Rowan and Micah Rowan, children of Caleb Rowan. This is recognized. This is sacred. This is law. A cheer went up from the tribe. Women ululated. Warriors fired rifles into the air in celebration. And through it all, Caleb held his children, and felt something inside him that had been frozen for 7 years finally begin to thaw. But the celebration was short-lived. A soldier appeared at the camp's edge. Time's up. The colonel demands your answer. Tall Elk walked out to meet Colonel Briggs again, Caleb beside him. The children have been adopted into the Blackfoot Nation through sacred ceremony, Tall Elk said formally. They are now tribal members. Under the Treaty of 1855, we have sovereign authority over our own people. You have no jurisdiction here. Briggs's face darkened. That's a hell of a technicality, Chief. It is treaty law, your law. Will you honor it? The colonel looked past them, at the assembled warriors, at the camp full of families, at the children huddled in the center. His jaw worked. I need to consult with my superiors, he said finally. This isn't a decision I can make alone. Then consult, Tall Elk said. We will wait. Briggs and his soldiers withdrew to make camp at a distance. Drummond's men looked furious, but they couldn't act without military support. That night, Caleb lay awake in the lodge Morning Bird had given them, listening to Juniper and Micah breathe. His children. Legally, spiritually, his. But for how long? How long before someone found a loophole, a way around the tribal adoption? He didn't have answers. All he had was the fierce certainty that he'd protect them, whatever it took, even if it meant war. Dawn came cold and uncertain, the sun rising over a camp that hadn't truly slept. Caleb stood at the edge of the encampment, watching the military camp in the distance. Smoke rose from their fires. Sentries paced, waiting. Behind him, he could hear Juniper singing softly to Micah, some lullaby her mother must have taught her. The sound was achingly normal, as if they weren't surrounded by 40 soldiers and a murderer demanding their return. Chief Tall Elk appeared beside him, wrapped in his buffalo robe against the morning chill. The colonel will give his answer today, the old man said. It wasn't a question. How do you know? Because his soldiers grow restless, because every day he delays is a day his superiors will question his judgment, and because Drummond is pushing him. Tall Elk gestured toward the military camp, where Caleb could see Elias's distinctive bulk gesticulating angrily at Colonel Briggs. The poison heart does not have patience. If Briggs decides the adoption doesn't count, then we fight. Tall Elk's voice was matter-of-fact. We will lose, but we will fight. Chief, I can't ask you to die for us. You did not ask. We chose. Tall Elk turned to face him, and there was something ancient and implacable in his eyes. The white men have taken everything from us, Caleb Rowan. Our lands, our buffalo, our way of life. They have broken every promise, violated every treaty, but they have not taken our honor. They have not taken our right to protect those who cannot protect themselves. He placed a gnarled hand on Caleb's shoulder. If we cannot do that, if we surrender children to monsters because soldiers demand it, then we are already dead. We are already defeated in the ways that matter most. Before Caleb could respond, a shout went up from the sentries. Riders approaching from the west. Not soldiers this time. 3 men on horseback riding hard. As they drew closer, Caleb recognized one of them. Marshal Pike, his horse lathered with sweat, his face grim but determined. Pike dismounted before his horse had fully stopped. Caleb, Chief, we need to talk. Now. They gathered in Tall Elk's lodge. Pike was accompanied by two other men. One was a stern-faced man in his 60s wearing a judge's black coat, the other a younger man with the look of a lawyer about him. "This is Judge Harrison from Helena," Pike said, "and his clerk, Mr. Sykes. I brought them as fast as I could." Judge Harrison set a leather case on the ground and opened it. Inside were the documents Caleb had stolen from Drummond's safe, along with additional papers. "I've reviewed the evidence," Harrison said without preamble. "The bank statements, the deeds, SADs, the mining shares. I've also sent telegrams to confirm their authenticity. Mr. Rowan, these documents prove conclusively that James Hale died a wealthy man and that his children are the rightful heirs to his estate." Caleb felt something loosen in his chest. "So Drummond's claim is fraudulent? Completely and utterly fraudulent." Harrison's voice was hard. "Furthermore, I've spoken with several witnesses in Copper Falls who are now willing to testify against Drummond. His former housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, a bank clerk who witnessed Drummond forging documents, a ranch hand who overheard Drummond planning to sell the infant." The judge's expression was disgusted. "Elias Drummond is a thief and very likely a murderer. I'm prepared to issue a warrant for his arrest immediately." "Then why are there soldiers outside?" Caleb asked. "Because Drummond filed his complaints first, because he has friends in the territorial government, and because Colonel Briggs is following orders that haven't been officially countermanded yet." Harrison pulled out a document bearing an official seal. "This is a writ from the territorial governor, superseding Briggs's orders. It commands the immediate arrest of Elias Drummond and orders the military to stand down." Pike grinned fiercely. "Took some doing to get it. The governor's been in Drummond's pocket for years. But once we showed him the evidence, once he understood how bad this would look if it came out that he was protecting a child abuser and murderer," he shrugged. "Even corrupt politicians know when to cut their losses." "So it's over?" Juniper's voice came from the entrance to the lodge. She stood there holding Micah, hope and fear warring on her face. "We're safe?" "Not quite yet, little one," Judge Harrison said gently. "But we're close." Tall Elk stood. "Come, let us deliver this news to the colonel and to the Poison Heart." They walked out as a group, the judge, the marshal, the chief, and Caleb. Warriors fell in around them, a silent honor guard. As they approached the military camp, soldiers scrambled to attention. Colonel Briggs emerged from his tent, his face thunderous. "What's this?" he demanded. Judge Harrison handed him the writ. "Read it, Colonel. Your orders have been superseded." Briggs read, his expression shifting from anger to confusion to something like relief. "This is legitimate? Bearing the governor's seal and signature, you're ordered to arrest Elias Drummond and release Caleb Rowan and the children from any charges." Behind Briggs, Elias had gone pale. "This is ridiculous, a farce. Those documents were stolen." "They were recovered," Harrison corrected coldly. "Recovered from your unlawful possession. And they prove you're a thief at minimum, a murderer at worst. You can't prove I killed James Hale. You can't prove anything." "Actually, we can." Pike stepped forward. "Mary Chen is willing to testify that she saw you tamper with Hale's wagon the day before his death. Samuel Brooks, the ranch hand, is willing to testify that he heard you planning to sell the baby. Martin Hughes at the First Bank is willing to testify that you forged documents to access Hale's accounts." He smiled without warmth. "Want me to go on?" Elias's face had gone from pale to purple with rage. "Those are lies, all lies. These people are nobodies, criminals, savages." He spat the last word in Tall Elk's direction. The chief didn't flinch. "The desperate insults of a cornered animal." "Colonel Briggs," Harrison said formally, "place this man under arrest." For a moment, Caleb thought Elias might actually submit, let himself be taken peacefully. But then he saw it, the shift in Elias's eyes, the subtle tensing of his body. "Elias, don't," Caleb started. Elias's hand went for his pistol. He was fast, faster than Caleb would have expected for a man his size. The gun cleared leather, came up, the barrel swinging toward Judge Harrison. 3 shots rang out simultaneously, one from Pike's rifle, one from a warrior's gun, and one from Caleb's pistol, the weapon in his hand before he'd consciously decided to draw. Elias staggered backward, red blooming across his chest in 3 places. The pistol fell from his hand. He looked down at himself, at the blood, with an expression of almost comical surprise. "You shot me," he said. Then he collapsed. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Colonel Briggs moved first, kneeling beside Elias, checking for a pulse. After a moment, he looked up and shook his head. "He's dead." Caleb's hand was shaking. He'd killed men before, in the war, but that had been different, distant. This was close, immediate, and however justified it felt, the weight of it settled on him like a physical thing. Pike walked over and gently took the pistol from Caleb's grip. Self-defense, clear as day. He drew first, went for the judge, at least a dozen witnesses. "I didn't want to kill him," Caleb said. His voice sounded far away to his own ears. "I wanted him to stand trial, to face justice." "He chose his own end," Tall Elk said quietly. "The poison consumed him from within until there was nothing left but violence." Judge Harrison straightened his coat with shaking hands. "Thank you, gentlemen. All of you. I believe you just saved my life." Briggs stood, his face grim but no longer hostile. "Chief Tall Elk, Mr. Rowan, I apologize for my part in this. I was following orders, but I should have questioned them sooner." "You were doing your duty," Tall Elk said. "As you understood it. Now you know the truth." "Now I know the truth," Briggs agreed. He looked at his assembled soldiers. "We're breaking camp. This matter is concluded." As the military began to dismantle their camp, Caleb walked back toward the Blackfoot lodges on legs that felt like water. Juniper ran to meet him, Micah bouncing in her arms. "Is he dead?" she asked. No fear in her voice, no sadness, just need for confirmation. "Yes, he's dead." She was quiet for a moment, processing. Then, "Good. Does that make me bad? That I'm glad he's dead?" Caleb knelt down to her level. "No, sweetheart. That makes you human. He hurt you, hurt your family. It's okay to be glad you're safe from him." "Will there be other Eliases? Other bad people who try to hurt us?" "Maybe. Probably." Caleb took her hand, Micah's tiny fingers wrapping around his thumb. "But you know what? You're not alone anymore. You've got me, and Chief Tall Elk and his people, and Marshal Pike and Judge Harrison. You've got a whole army of people who'll stand between you and anyone who tries to hurt you." Tears welled up in Juniper's eyes. "Promise?" "I promise." The next few days passed in a blur of bureaucracy and procedure. Judge Harrison stayed at the Blackfoot camp, conducting an impromptu hearing right there in Tall Elk's lodge. Witnesses testified, documents were examined and authenticated. Mary Chen spoke through tears about what she'd seen. Samuel Brooks nervously confirmed Elias's plans to sell Micah. The bank clerk produced forged signatures. By the end of it, the picture was complete and damning. Elias Drummond had murdered James Hale by sabotaging his wagon. He'd then used forged documents to claim guardianship of the children and steal their $40,000 inheritance. He'd abused Juniper physically and emotionally, and had been actively negotiating to sell 4-month-old Micah to a contact in St. Louis for $500. "It's one of the most clear-cut cases of murder and theft I've seen in 20 years on the bench," Harrison said. He was seated by Tall Elk's fire, the paperwork spread out before him. If Drummond had lived to stand trial, he'd have been hanged, no question. "What happens to the children now?" Caleb asked. "To their inheritance?" "That's the complicated part." Harrison sipped the tea Morningbird had prepared. "The inheritance is rightfully theirs, but they're minors. They need a legal guardian to manage it until they come of age. I'm their guardian. The tribe adopted them. I adopted them." "I know, and I'm prepared to recognize that adoption in territorial court. But," Harrison hesitated. "Caleb, I need you to understand what you're taking on. It's not just raising 2 children, it's managing a substantial estate. Mining shares, land deeds, investment accounts. You'll be responsible for all of it until Juniper turns 18. "I don't want their money." "I know you don't. That's precisely why you're the right person to manage it." Harrison pulled out a fresh document. "I'm proposing we set up a trust. The inheritance goes into it, managed by a board that includes you, myself, and a representative from the bank. You'll have access to funds for the children's care and education, but the principal remains protected until they're adults." That sounds reasonable. Good, because there's something else. Harrison's expression grew more serious. The Blackfoot adoption is recognized under tribal law and treaty, but for it to be fully recognized in territorial courts, we need to formalize it, file the proper paperwork, make it official in the eyes of the federal government. How do we do that? You petition for legal adoption through the territorial court. Given the circumstances, given that the children have already expressed their desire to remain with you, and given that you're now managing their estate, I don't foresee any issues. But it will take time, months probably. What happens in the meantime? In the meantime, you're their guardian under tribal law and under my emergency order. That should be sufficient. Harrison smiled slightly, though I'd recommend you come back to civilization eventually. Children need schools, doctors, a life beyond a military camp. We have a ranch, Caleb said. It's not much, but it's home. Then I suggest you take your children home, Mr. Rowan. That night, the tribe held a feast. Not a celebration exactly. Elias's death hung too heavy for that, but a marking of transition, of danger past and new beginnings. Caleb sat beside the fire, watching Juniper play with the other children. She was laughing, actually laughing, the sound bright and free. Micah was being passed from woman to woman, each one cooing over him, making him giggle. They are already healing, Tall Elk said, settling beside him. Children are resilient in ways adults are not. I hope so. You doubt? I doubt myself. I doubt I can give them what they need. Tall Elk was quiet for a moment. You know what makes a good father, Caleb Rowan. Not perfection, not wealth or wisdom or strength. What makes a good father is showing up, every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. He gestured toward Juniper. That child has known abandonment, known adults who put their own desires above her welfare. You show up for her, you keep showing up, and she will thrive. And when I fail, when I make mistakes, then you admit them, apologize, do better next time. Tall Elk's eyes crinkled with something like amusement. You think I was a perfect father? I made many mistakes, yelled when I should have listened, was absent when I should have been present, but my children knew I loved them, knew I would die for them. That knowledge carried them through my failures. Before Caleb could respond, Juniper appeared in front of them, slightly out of breath from playing. Papa? She said tentatively, testing out the word. Caleb's throat tightened. Yes, Juniper? Morningbird says we're going home tomorrow, back to your ranch, back to our ranch. She fidgeted with her dress. Is it okay if I'm scared? Of what? Of leaving here. The tribe has been so kind, and out there, she gestured vaguely toward the darkness beyond the fire. Out there, everyone believed Elias. Everyone thought we were the problem. What if they still think that? Caleb pulled her close, and she curled against him like a much younger child. Some people might. People believe what's easy, what's comfortable. But you know what? Their opinions don't matter. What matters is the truth. And the truth is that you're a brave, smart, incredible girl who saved her brother's life. The truth is that you're my daughter now, and I'm going to make damn sure everyone knows it. Juniper giggled at the curse, then sobered. Do you think Mama and Papa are watching? From heaven? I think if heaven exists, they're watching, and I think they're proud of you. What about you? Your wife? Do you think she's watching too? Caleb was surprised by the question, by how much it hurt and healed in equal measure. Yeah, I think Emily's watching, and I think... His voice cracked. I think she'd be glad I found you and Micah. Glad I'm not alone anymore. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire. Micah had fallen asleep in Morningbird's arms, milk-drunk and peaceful. The warriors were telling stories, their voices rising and falling with the rhythm of ancient words. This was family, Caleb realized. Not the family he'd dreamed of once, not the family he'd lost, but family nonetheless. Chosen. Hard-won. Real. The next morning, they prepared to leave. Morningbird packed food for the journey, enough to feed them for a week. Warriors gave Caleb gifts, a better rifle, ammunition, a knife with a carved bone handle. Each gift came with solemn words about protecting the children, about being worthy of the trust placed in him. Chief Tall Elk was the last to say goodbye. He placed his hands on each child's head, speaking in Blackfoot, then in English. You are Blackfoot now, always. If you need us, we will come. If you are threatened, we will fight. This is not a promise. It is a fact. He looked at Caleb. And you, Caleb Rowan. You are brother to us now. Our lodge is your lodge. Our people are your people. I don't know how to thank you, Caleb said. Then do not try. Simply live well. Raise these children well. That is thanks enough. Judge Harrison and Marshal Pike rode with them back to Copper Falls. The town looked different somehow, though nothing physical had changed. Maybe it was just that Caleb saw it differently now, through the eyes of a father with children to protect. They stopped at the general store first. Harris, the proprietor, came out wringing his hands nervously. Mr. Rowan, I heard about everything. I'm sorry I gossiped. Sorry I didn't question Drummond's story. He looked at Juniper. I'm sorry, little miss, for not seeing. Juniper pressed closer to Caleb but nodded. Okay. I need supplies, Caleb said. Food, clothing for the children, proper supplies. Of course. And Mr. Rowan? Harris swallowed hard. It's on the house. Everything. For as long as you need. It's the least I can do. Word spread quickly through town. By the time they left the general store, a small crowd had gathered. Not hostile, curious, ashamed. Mary Chen pushed through the crowd and embraced Juniper, tears streaming down her face. You're safe. Thank God you're safe. Others came forward, a woman who'd known Juniper's mother. A man who'd worked with James Hale. One by one they apologized, said they should have questioned Drummond's story. Should have looked harder. Caleb watched it all with mixed feelings. These people had abandoned 2 children when it mattered most. But they were trying now. That had to count for something. Sheriff Brennan appeared, looking 10 years older than he had a week ago. He stopped in front of Caleb, his hat in his hands. Rowan, I owe you an apology. Several apologies. I should have investigated Hale's death properly. Should have listened to Mrs. Chen. Should have questioned Drummond's story about the children. His voice was rough with shame. I failed these kids, failed their father, failed my duty as sheriff. Yes, Caleb said flatly. You did. Brennan flinched but nodded. I'm submitting my resignation to the town council. It's time for someone else to wear this badge, someone who'll actually do the job right. Who decides who wears it next? The council and the people. Brennan looked at Pike. Marshal Pike would make a good sheriff, if he's willing. Pike looked surprised. I'm federal. I can't just... The federal government doesn't pay you enough anyway, Brennan said with a ghost of his old humor. Copper Falls needs someone they can trust, someone who proved they'll fight for what's right, even when it's hard. I'll think about it, Pike said. They left town as the sun reached its zenith. The ranch was only 2 hours away, but it felt like crossing into a different world. The mountains rose around them, snow-capped and eternal. The air was clean and cold, and ahead, visible as they crested the last ridge, was the cabin. Smoke rising from the chimney, warriors from Tall Elk's camp had gone ahead to prepare it, warm and welcoming. Is that home? Juniper asked. That's home, Caleb confirmed. They rode down into the valley. The cabin looked smaller than Caleb remembered, rougher, but it was solid, safe, theirs. Inside, a fire was burning. Supplies were stocked. Someone had even left fresh bread and stew still warm in the pot. A note in Morning Bird's careful script. For the new family, may your home be filled with love. Caleb set Micah down in the makeshift cradle he'd built weeks ago. Had it really only been weeks? It felt like years. Juniper explored the cabin like it was a palace, touching everything gently, reverently. Where will I sleep? She asked. The bedroom. I'll take the main room. But that's your room. Not anymore. It's yours and Micah's. I'll build another room come spring, maybe 2, one for each of you. But for now, you take the bedroom. Juniper's eyes filled with tears. Nobody's ever given me a room before. At Elias's house, I slept in the cellar, and before, when Mama and Papa were alive, I shared with 3 cousins. Well, now you have your own room. You can decorate it however you want. We'll go to town, get proper furniture, maybe some paint for the walls, whatever you want. She threw her arms around him, nearly knocking him over. "Thank you, Papa. Thank you." That night, after Juniper had fallen asleep with Micah cradled beside her, after Caleb had checked the locks 3 times and positioned his rifle within easy reach, he sat by the fire and let himself feel the full weight of what had happened. He'd killed a man, adopted 2 children, made enemies and allies, burned bridges and built new ones. His quiet, solitary life was gone forever, replaced by something messy and complicated and utterly terrifying. And he wouldn't change a thing. A sound from the bedroom made him look up. Juniper stood in the doorway, wrapped in a blanket, her hair mussed from sleep. "Can't sleep?" Caleb asked. "I had a bad dream about Elias." She patted over and climbed into his lap without asking, the way a daughter should. "But then I woke up and remembered he's dead. He can't hurt us anymore." "That's right, he can't." But there was something else in the dream, something Elias said before everything. "I forgot to tell you before, but it seemed important." She looked up at him with those uneven eyes. He said he had insurance, that if anything happened to him, if anyone came asking questions, there were people who'd make sure the truth never came out. He said he had friends in high places. A chill ran down Caleb's spine. "What friends? Did he say names?" "No, but he was talking to someone who visited late at night after I was supposed to be asleep. Someone important, because Elias was being respectful. He never was respectful unless the person had power." She frowned, trying to remember. There was a laugh, a woman's laugh, and perfume. Expensive perfume. A woman? I think so. I never saw her, just heard voices through the floorboards. But Elias said something about covering tracks and making problems disappear. And the woman said something like, "As long as my name stays out of it, do what you must." Caleb's mind raced. A woman with power and influence, willing to help Drummond cover up murder and theft. Who fit that description? The answer came to him with sickening clarity. There was only one woman in territorial politics with that kind of reach: Margaret Fairchild, the territorial governor's wife, the real power behind her husband's office, according to rumor. If she'd been helping Drummond, if she was implicated in his crimes, she wouldn't just let this go. She'd have too much to lose. "Papa?" Juniper's voice was small. "Did I say something wrong?" "No, sweetheart, you did exactly right." Caleb hugged her tighter. "You're smart and brave, and I'm proud of you. But listen to me carefully. Don't tell anyone else about this. Not Marshal Pike, not Judge Harrison, not anyone. Not until I figure out what to do with this information." "Because it could be dangerous?" "Very dangerous." Juniper nodded against his chest. "Okay, I won't tell." She yawned. "Can I sleep out here tonight? With you? I don't want to be alone." "Of course." He carried her to the couch, grabbed extra blankets, and settled her beside him. Within minutes, she was asleep again, her breathing deep and even. But Caleb stayed awake, staring into the fire, his mind turning over this new complication. They'd defeated Elias Drummond, but if Margaret Fairchild was involved, if she'd been complicit in Drummond's crimes, then this was far from over. More trouble was coming. He could feel it like a storm on the horizon, gathering strength. But this time, he wouldn't face it alone. He had children to protect, allies to call on. And most importantly, he had the truth. Whatever came next, whatever battles lay ahead, they'd face them together, as a family. Outside, the wind picked up, whistling around the cabin's eaves. Snow began to fall again, soft and steady, covering the world in white. Inside, the fire burned warm, 3 souls finding peace in the darkness. Caleb Rowan, who'd been alone for 7 years, was alone no more. And he'd be damned if anyone, powerful or otherwise, took that away from him. The first attack came 3 weeks later, on a bitter February morning when the world was still locked in winter's grip. Caleb was in the barn feeding the horses when he heard Buck whinny nervously. The big gelding's ears were pinned back, nostrils flaring. Caleb's hand went instinctively to his pistol as he moved to the barn door and looked out. 3 riders were approaching from the east, moving slowly through the snow. Not soldiers this time. These men wore civilian clothes, but they moved like professionals. Hired guns, same as the ones Elias had employed. Caleb's blood went cold. He'd known this might happen, but he'd hoped for more time. Time to fortify the ranch. Time to prepare. He ran for the cabin. Inside, Juniper was reading to Micah from one of the books they'd bought in town, her finger tracing under each word. She looked up as Caleb burst in, and the fear that flashed across her face told him she'd already learned to read his expressions. Men coming? She asked. 3 of them. Could be trouble. Caleb grabbed his rifle, checked the load. You remember what to do? Cellar. Don't come out until you say. She scooped up Micah. But Papa, what if they hurt you? They won't get the chance. Now go. Juniper disappeared into the bedroom. Caleb heard the trapdoor open and close. Good girl. He positioned himself by the window, rifle ready, and waited. The rider stopped at the fence line, the same spot where this whole thing had started. The one in front called out. Caleb Rowan, we're here on behalf of Mrs. Margaret Fairchild. She'd like a word about certain documents that came into your possession. So his suspicions had been right. Margaret Fairchild was involved, and she wanted the evidence that could connect her to Drummond's crimes. Tell Mrs. Fairchild to send a letter like civilized folks, Caleb shouted back. Or better yet, come herself if she's got business with me. Mrs. Fairchild doesn't make social calls to ranch trash. The man's voice was cold, professional. She's given you a simple choice. Hand over any papers relating to Elias Drummond and James Hale's estate. And this ends peacefully. Refuse and well, he gestured at his companions. We're authorized to use whatever means necessary. Including murder? If it comes to that, Caleb's finger tightened on the trigger. Here's my answer. You turn around and ride back to your employer. Tell her if she wants those documents, she can petition the court same as anyone else. And tell her if she sends more hired killers to my property, they'll leave in pine boxes. The lead rider sighed like he was disappointed. That's unfortunate. We'd hoped to do this quietly. He nodded to his companions. They spread out flanking the cabin. Caleb fired. The shot took the lead rider in the shoulder, spinning him off his horse. The other 2 dove for cover behind the fence, returning fire. Bullets slammed into the cabin walls, shattered a window. Caleb ducked, moved to a different position, fired again. The fight lasted maybe 3 minutes, but it felt like hours. Caleb had the advantage of cover and familiarity with his own land. The hired guns had numbers and professional training. It was a near thing. Then, from the north, came the sound of hoofbeats. Many hoofbeats. Caleb risked a glance and felt relief flood through him. Blackfoot warriors, 20 or more, riding hard toward the ranch. Chief Tall Elk was at their head, and even from a distance, Caleb could see the fury on the old man's face. The hired guns saw them too. The lead man, bleeding from his shoulder, managed to get back on his horse. His companions followed suit. They spurred their mounts east, racing away from the approaching warriors. The Blackfoot didn't pursue. They surrounded the ranch instead, forming a protective circle. Tall Elk dismounted and walked to the cabin. Caleb met him at the door. How did you know? Caleb asked. We have been watching. Since you left our camp, warriors have kept watch on your lands from a distance. When these men came, when we saw them spread out like hunters surrounding prey, we rode. Tall Elk's eyes were hard. You are ours to protect, Caleb Rowan. Did you think we would abandon you to face your enemies alone? I'm grateful. But Chief, this could start something bigger. If Mrs. Fairchild is behind this, then let it start. Tall Elk's voice was absolute. We are tired of watching the powerful prey on the helpless, tired of staying silent while children are hurt and good men are murdered. If this Fairchild woman wants war, we will give it to her. Before Caleb could respond, more riders appeared, this time from the west. Marshal Pike, Judge Harrison, and a dozen men from Copper Falls, all armed. Pike dismounted, his face grim. We heard shots. Everyone all right? We're fine, but there were 3 hired guns here. Said they were working for Margaret Fairchild. They demanded I turn over Drummond's documents. Harrison's expression darkened. Margaret Fairchild. I'd suspected she might be involved, but I'd hoped I was wrong. He pulled out a telegram from his coat. This came through yesterday. I was on my way here to tell you. The territorial governor is dead. Heart attack, they're saying. Very convenient timing. And very suspicious, Pike added. The governor dies right as questions are being asked about his wife's connection to Drummond? There's no such thing as coincidence. She killed him, Caleb said with certainty. Her own husband. To keep him from talking. Probably, but proving it is another matter. Harrison looked troubled. Margaret Fairchild is now the acting territorial administrator until a new governor is appointed, which means she has access to military forces, law enforcement, everything. If she's determined to silence you, then we need to move first, Pike interrupted. Get ahead of this before she can consolidate power. How? Caleb asked. She's got the law on her side now. She's got resources we can't match. No, Harrison said slowly, a calculating look in his eyes. But she's also terrified. Desperate. Otherwise, she wouldn't have sent hired killers. Desperate people make mistakes. He turned to Pike. That evidence you gathered, the testimonies, Drummond's documents. How solid is it? Rock solid. Why? Because I'm calling for an emergency territorial hearing. Every judge, every marshal, every elected official. We present the evidence publicly in front of everyone. Make it impossible to suppress or ignore. Harrison's voice grew stronger. We expose not just Drummond's crimes, but everyone who helped him, everyone who looked the other way. And if Margaret Fairchild is implicated, if the evidence points to her involvement, then desperate or not, she'll face justice. She'll never allow that hearing to happen, Caleb said. She won't have a choice. I'm the senior territorial judge. I have the authority to call it. And by the time she realizes what's happening, it'll be too late to stop it without revealing her guilt. Harrison smiled grimly. Sometimes the law actually works, Mr. Rowan. We just have to make sure we work faster than the corruption can spread. The next 2 weeks were a blur of preparation. Judge Harrison sent telegrams to every corner of the territory. Marshal Pike gathered witnesses, protected them from intimidation. The men of Copper Falls, shamed by their earlier complicity, formed a volunteer guard around Caleb's ranch. And the Blackfoot warriors stayed. They camped on Caleb's land, a visible deterrent to anyone who might try another attack. Chief Tall Elk moved into the cabin's main room, and in the evenings he told Juniper stories about the old days, about warriors and heroes and people who stood up to injustice even when it seemed hopeless. Juniper absorbed every word. She was healing, Caleb could see it. The nightmares were less frequent. The flinch when someone raised their voice was fading. She played with the Blackfoot children who came to visit, laughed more, smiled easier. She was becoming, slowly but surely, just a kid. Micah thrived too. He was sitting up now, babbling, reaching for everything. He'd learned to recognize Caleb's face would light up whenever he appeared. The bond between them was growing stronger every day, that ineffable connection between parent and child that transcended blood. Late one night, as Caleb rocked Micah to sleep, Juniper appeared at his elbow. Papa, can I ask you something? Always. When this is over, when the bad people can't hurt us anymore, will we stay here, at the ranch? That's the plan. Why? She was quiet for a moment. Because it feels like home now. And I was scared it might not last, that someone would take it away. Caleb set Micah in his cradle and pulled Juniper close. Nobody's taking this away. This ranch, this family, it's ours. Permanent. You understand? Whatever happens at this hearing, whatever comes after, we're staying together. Promise? I promise. The hearing was set for March 1st in Helena, the territorial capital. Caleb, the children, Chief Tall Elk, and a dozen warriors made the journey together, along with Marshal Pike and the witnesses. Judge Harrison had gone ahead to prepare. Helena was bigger than Copper Falls, more sophisticated. The territorial courthouse was an imposing stone building that spoke of law and order. But Caleb had learned that impressive buildings didn't guarantee justice. They arrived the day before the hearing. The town was buzzing with rumors. Everyone knew something big was about to happen. The territorial administrator herself would be in attendance. All the major ranchers, businessmen, politicians. That night, in their hotel room, Juniper couldn't sleep. What if they don't believe us? She asked. What if Mrs. Fairchild is too powerful? Then we'll find another way, Caleb said. But Juniper, you need to understand something. Tomorrow, you're going to have to testify. Tell the court what Elias did to you, what he said about Mrs. Fairchild. It's going to be hard, scary, but it's important. Will she be there? Mrs. Fairchild? Probably. Juniper's hand went to her throat, to those faded bruises. What if she tries to hurt us, like Elias did? She won't get the chance. I'll be right there with you. So will Chief Tall Elk and Marshal Pike. You're not alone in this. The next morning dawned clear and cold. The courthouse filled early, every seat taken, people standing in the aisles. Caleb had never seen so many people in one place. Margaret Fairchild sat in the front row, regal and composed in an expensive black dress. She was maybe 50, handsome rather than beautiful, with ice blue eyes that missed nothing. When her gaze swept over Caleb and the children, there was no recognition, no guilt, just cold calculation. Judge Harrison called the hearing to order. His voice rang out clear and strong. We are gathered to examine evidence relating to the death of James Hale and the subsequent treatment of his children. Evidence that suggests a conspiracy of theft, abuse, and murder extending beyond one man. He paused, letting that sink in. This hearing will determine whether criminal charges should be filed and against whom. For the next 3 hours, witness after witness took the stand. Mary Chen described seeing Elias tamper with the wagon. The ranch hand testified about Elias's plans to sell Micah. The bank clerk confirmed forged signatures. Each piece of testimony built on the last, creating an undeniable picture of Elias Drummond's crimes. Then Caleb took the stand. He described finding the children in the blizzard, the bruises on Juniper's neck, the stolen documents he'd recovered from Drummond's safe. He presented the evidence methodically, professionally, giving the court no reason to doubt his credibility. Finally, Judge Harrison called Juniper to testify. She looked so small climbing into the witness chair, her feet barely touching the ground. But her voice, when she spoke, was steady. Harrison kept his question simple. What happened to your father? How did Elias treat you? What did you hear in Elias's house late at night? Juniper answered each question clearly. She described the abuse, the threats, the fear. And then she described the late-night visitor with the woman's laugh and expensive perfume, the conversations about covering tracks and making problems disappear. Did you ever see this visitor? Harrison asked. Once, just for a moment. I was supposed to be asleep, but I heard shouting and I looked through a crack in the floorboards. I saw a woman in a green dress with gold buttons. Juniper's eyes found Margaret Fairchild in the crowd. That woman, the one sitting in the front row. The courthouse erupted, people shouting, arguing. Margaret Fairchild remained perfectly still, her expression unchanged. But Caleb saw her hands tighten on her purse, knuckles going white. Harrison banged his gavel for order. Mrs. Fairchild, you're accused of conspiracy in James Hale's murder and the subsequent abuse of his children. How do you respond? Margaret stood gracefully. With contempt for these proceedings, that child is clearly coached, repeating lies fed to her by this criminal Rowan and his savage allies. Her voice dripped with disdain. I am the territorial administrator. I will not dignify these accusations by responding to them. You don't have a choice, Harrison said coldly. You're under oath. Answer the question. Did you meet with Elias Drummond to discuss James Hale? I refuse to answer on the grounds that these proceedings are illegitimate. Your refusal is noted, but Mrs. Fairchild, I have additional evidence. Harrison pulled out a sheaf of papers. Telegrams between you and Drummond, financial records showing payments from your personal accounts to his, letters discussing Hale's estate and how to handle the children problem. Margaret's composure cracked slightly. Where did you get those? Those are private. They were recovered from Drummond's safe along with the other documents, and they're admissible as evidence. Harrison's voice was hard as stone. You helped Elias Drummond murder James Hale because Hale had discovered your husband was taking bribes from mining companies. Bribes that you were managing. Hale threatened to go public, so you arranged his death and helped Drummond steal the inheritance to keep him quiet and compliant. That's absurd. You have no proof. We have your letters, your payments, your telegrams. Harrison stood. Margaret Fairchild, I am placing you under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, accessory to theft, accessory to child abuse, and obstruction of justice. Marshal Pike moved forward, but Margaret backed away. Her hand went into her purse. Don't, Pike warned. She pulled out a Derringer, the small pistol looking almost delicate in her hand. But it was pointing at Juniper, and there was nothing delicate about the murder in Margaret's eyes. This ends now, Margaret said, her voice shaking with rage. That little brat and her testimony. All of this ends. Caleb moved without thinking, throwing himself between the gun and Juniper. But he wasn't fast enough. Nobody was fast enough. The shot rang out, deafening in the enclosed space. But it wasn't Margaret's Derringer. It was Chief Tall Elk's rifle, fired from where he stood at the back of the courtroom. The bullet took Margaret in the hand, sent the Derringer flying. She screamed, clutching her shattered fingers. Pike was on her in seconds, wrestling her to the ground, applying handcuffs while she shrieked obscenities and threats. Caleb turned to find Juniper pressed against his chest, Micah clutched in her arms, both children safe. Terrified, but safe. "It's over," he breathed. "It's finally over." But the aftermath took weeks to sort out. Margaret Fairchild was tried and convicted on all charges. The evidence was overwhelming, her guilt undeniable. She was sentenced to 20 years in the territorial prison. Her husband had indeed been poisoned, the autopsy revealed. Small doses over months, untraceable until someone knew to look for it. Margaret had killed him to keep him silent and to claim power for herself. The mining companies she'd been taking bribes from were investigated. 3 territorial officials were arrested. Copper Falls got a new sheriff. Marshal Pike accepted the position, figuring someone needed to keep the town honest. Judge Harrison finalized the adoption papers. Juniper Hale and Micah Hale became, legally and permanently, Juniper Rowan and Micah Rowan. The inheritance was placed in trust, managed carefully, there for the children when they came of age. And Chief Tall Elk received official recognition from the federal government for his role in stopping Margaret Fairchild. The Blackfoot lands were expanded slightly, not as much as they deserved, not nearly enough to make up for what had been stolen, but something, a gesture of respect, however small. Winter gave way to spring. The snow melted, revealing green grass and wildflowers. Caleb stood on his porch one April morning watching Juniper chase butterflies in the meadow while Micah practiced crawling on a blanket in the sun. The ranch had changed. Caleb had built 2 new rooms onto the cabin just as he'd promised. Juniper had her own space now, decorated with drawings and books and a window that looked out toward the mountains. Micah had a nursery with a proper crib and toys scattered everywhere. They had neighbors now, too. Blackfoot families who visited often, bringing food and stories and laughter. People from Copper Falls who stopped by to check on them, to bring supplies, to rebuild the trust that had been broken. The ranch wasn't lonely anymore. It was loud and messy and chaotic and perfect. Juniper ran up to the porch, out of breath and grinning. Her eye had improved with proper medical care. She'd never have perfect vision, but the blurriness had faded. She could read now without squinting, could see the world in sharper focus. "Papa, look!" She held out her cupped hands. Inside was a butterfly, wings opening and closing slowly. "Isn't it beautiful?" "It is," Caleb agreed. "Mrs. Chen says butterflies mean new beginnings, transformation. She says we're like butterflies, me and Micah and you. We were in a dark place, but now we're free." Juniper opened her hands and the butterfly flew away, climbing toward the sky. "Do you think that's true?" Caleb watched the butterfly disappear into the blue. He thought about Emily and the life they'd never gotten to have. He thought about 7 years of grief and isolation. He thought about a little girl collapsing in a blizzard, whispering, "Take him instead of me," offering her own life to save her brother. He thought about how that moment had saved them all, not just Juniper and Micah, but him too. "Yeah," he said softly, "I think that's true." That evening, Chief Tall Elk came to visit. He did that now, once a week, sharing meals and stories and the quiet companionship of old friends. They sat on the porch, while the children slept inside, watching the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. "You have done well," Tall Elk said. "The children are happy, healthy. They're healing." "We all are," Caleb said. "Slowly, but we are." "Oh, it is strange how the spirits work. You sought to save them, but perhaps they saved you also." "No perhaps about it. They did save me." Caleb paused, then asked the question that had been weighing on him. "Chief, when you had me answer those 3 questions during the adoption ceremony, did you already know I'd pass, or was it a real test?" Tall Elk was quiet for a long moment. "I knew you would answer truthfully. I knew your heart was good. But whether that would be enough, whether the spirits would accept you as father, that I did not know. He looked at Caleb with those ancient eyes. The spirits test all of us, Caleb Rowan. Every day. Every choice. The question is not whether we are tested, but whether we have the courage to answer honestly. Inside the cabin, Micah began to cry. Not the desperate wail of a child in danger, just the fussy cry of a baby who wanted attention. Caleb stood. That's my cue. Go, Tall Elk said with a smile. Be the father you have become. Caleb went inside to find Juniper already in the nursery, rocking Micah gently. She looked up as Caleb entered. He's teething again, she said. I was going to get you, but I thought I'd try first. You're doing great. Caleb joined her, watching as Micah's cries subsided into hiccups, then quiet. You're a good big sister. You're a good papa, Juniper said. Then more quietly, do you think Mama and Papa would be happy with how things turned out? Caleb thought about James Hale, a man he'd never met but whose courage in standing up to corruption had ultimately cost him his life. He thought about Juniper's mother, dying to bring Micah into the world. I think they'd be proud of you, he said. Both of you. I think they'd be grateful you survived, that you're safe, that you're loved. And I think, his voice caught, I think they'd approve of me trying to be your father, even though I'm not them, even though I can never replace them. You're not supposed to replace them, Juniper said, with a child's simple wisdom. You're supposed to be you, and you're exactly who we need. She put Micah in his crib and hugged Caleb fiercely. He held her close, this brave girl who'd walked through hell and come out the other side still capable of love, still capable of trust. Love you, Papa, she whispered. Love you too, sweetheart, both of you, so much. That night, after the children were asleep, Caleb stood outside under the stars, the same stars that had watched over him during 7 years of solitude, the same stars that had witnessed his grief and rage and slow, painful healing. But they were watching over something different now. Not a broken man living half a life. A father, a family, a home filled with laughter and crying and chaos and love. Somewhere in the darkness, an owl called. In the distance, wolves sang to the moon. The world turned on, indifferent and eternal. But here, in this small corner of Montana, in this rough cabin on the edge of the wilderness, something miraculous had happened. 3 broken souls had found each other in a storm. And together, slowly, painfully, beautifully, they'd made each other whole. Caleb looked up at the stars, at Emily's stars, and whispered a prayer of thanks. Thanks for 7 years that had nearly destroyed him. Thanks for the grief that had made him strong enough to survive this. Thanks for a blizzard that had brought 2 children to his door and given him one more chance at the life he thought he'd lost forever. Inside, Micah began to fuss again. Caleb smiled and went to him, lifting his son, from the crib and rocking him gently in the darkness. Hush now, little man, he murmured. Papa's here. Papa's always here. And as Micah quieted, as his small hand wrapped around Caleb's finger, as the cabin settled into the peaceful breathing of a sleeping family, Caleb Rowan finally understood what Emily had tried to tell him in those last moments before she died. It's not about the time we get. It's about what we do with it, who we love, who we protect, who we become. He'd lost one family to fate and cruel chance, but he'd been given another, forged in fire and snow and desperate courage. And this time, this family, he would protect with everything he had, for all his days, for all their days, together. The Montana wind blew soft and warm through the open window, carrying with it the scent of pine and new grass and possibility. Spring had come at last, melting the ice, washing away the blood and fear and pain. And in its wake, it left hope. It left family. It left home. The little girl who'd whispered, "Take him instead of me," was sleeping peacefully now, safe in her own room, knowing she was loved. The baby who'd nearly frozen in his sister's arms was growing strong and happy, surrounded by people who would die to protect him. And the rancher who'd spent 7 years waiting to die had finally found a reason to live. Not in spite of the pain, but because of it. Because pain had taught him the value of joy. Loss had taught him the preciousness of love. And darkness had shown him how to recognize light when it appeared at his fence line in the middle of a blizzard, carried by a 7-year-old girl with more courage than any warrior he'd ever known. Caleb looked down at Micah, now sleeping peacefully in his arms, and smiled. "Welcome home, son," he whispered. "Welcome home." Outside, the stars blazed eternal and uncaring, but inside the cabin, love burned brighter still, and that made all the difference.